Cool. So welcome, Mr. Nate Nevado, to the Filipino Garage.
What's up? Glad to be here.
Before we move any further, I have an instrumental for you.
Okay. Oh, yes. That's what's up. Y'all hip-hop out there?
We got Mr. Nate Nevado.
Yes, Nate Diggs in the building.
Nate Diggs.
Major shout out to Kuya Chris. The Filipino Garage. We are the past. We are the present. We are the future. We are hip hop. We are the past. We are the present. We are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past. We are the present. We are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past. We are the present. We are the future. We are hip hop. The immigrant experience, fighting through resistance, colonizing minds, trying to diminish our existence. Stop, look, and listen. Please pay attention. Use our currency to narrate our inventions. Little are we mentioned. We're in the indigenous, speaking our truths, following our lineages. Tell me if you're feeling this, sparking up the stimulants. We are the imperative, the power of the narrative. We are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. We are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say shout out to the veteranos didn't get their pensions. Shout out to cicadas who be working in the field and shit. Shout out to the OFW sending home remittances. Shout out to the Filipino people who have strengthened us. One for ethnic studies and two to flip the pages. Three's for the people who make minimum wages. Four's for the students who want the liberation from the systems that stole the histories and education. We are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Say we are the past, we are the present, we are the future. We are hip hop. Yeah.
Hey.
That's what's up, my dude.
Nate Diggs.
Yes, sir.
Skyline College. Rock the school bell.
Hey, yes, y'all.
Can you tell me a little bit about that song? You said you did that with a homie, and then he's in Hawaii right now. So we weren't able to get the funds to fly him out for this performance, Rob. But we'll see in the future. So who is this? Who's the homie, and how did the song come about?
This is the homie Punahele. He's out there in Hawaii, on Oahu, definitely representing the sovereignty movement. And him and his crew, we have a Rock the School Bells in Hawaii, and they had invited me to do a keynote out there. And so, I'm always about that non-traditional keynote. I'm not going to come with the traditional here. I'm going to speak to y'all. And so I wanted to be able to inject some Hawaiian spirits in there and some culture. And so it just made sense for me to include Punahele as part of my keynote. So in many ways, he was like co-keynoting with me. Right. And there's a lot of young ones out there. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of kids, Hawaiians, Native Hawaiians, Filipinos who really don't know their history. And Punahele is one of those. He's a very well-renowned rapper. And a lot of kids look up to him. And part of his responsibility is to really have them understand the history. And so we're just making a song that we want to honor the past. We want to honor the present. But we also want to honor the future, which is our kids. Right. And so, and I think that was very powerful for us to do something like that, because anytime you think about Hawaii, the first thing people think about is like beautiful oceans, palm trees, right? Vacation. But nobody really sees like what goes on in the islands, right? There's a lot of poverty, a lot of homelessness, a lot of drug use, particularly in the communities of color. And so we really want to make that evident and really want to put it out there, but at the same time, honoring our histories. There's some strengths to that. There's some resiliency to that.
I was just reading, I think, a thread on Twitter the other day about how Hawaii is one of the only white minority states, but prison system is predominantly people of color and Native Hawaiians, and how also poverty rates are specifically with Native Hawaiians and people of color within those demographics, and it's even stratified within Asians versus Native Hawaiians, and even those who have been stratified as Filipinos, right? Like to the history, like as you mentioned in your raps about the Sakadas, and then even how their pays were tiered, right, based on their race, right? So there's like a history of that. When did y'all write this?
We wrote this last year. I think it was last year.
This was the keynote for last year?
October 2018.
Oh, and then you went over to Hawaii. You went to the Rock the School Bells over there.
They flew me out there. It was dope. And they had Ruby Ibarra as their closer. It was cool to open up and then Ruby Ibarra closing it out. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So we just jumped into it because this is Rock the School Bells, right? I want folks who are listening, who may not be here in the Bay Area, to get a little context, okay? I've had Kim Davalos on here. We talked a little bit about Rock the School Bells.
Yeah.
But then we finally got Mr. Nate Nevado here as one of my homies that I told him on a recent podcast. I was like, bro, you don't know who's gonna be on here. And he said, who? NN? The godfather of hip hop here in the Bay? Of Filipinos in hip hop and education. So please, could you give me a little rundown on Rock the School Bells, right? How it started and your involvement in that. And and give a little context for people who are listening.
Yeah, man. Oh man. Well, I can't really speak on Rock the School Bells without really acknowledging, how I got into hip hop. You know what I mean? Like, I grew up all over the United States. You feel me? My pop's a military dude. My mom's a nurse. So my pops was everywhere. We lived in Virginia, Chicago, Alameda. I mean, we was moving from East Coast to West Coast, and really, it was the East Coast where I really learned about hip hop.
In a time frame of moving like 1 year in a spot, 2 years in a spot?
Yeah, in the late 70s, early 80s, I was living in Virginia. And then we moved to Chicago in the 90s.
Oh.
And then from, I would say, 93, 94 on. Oh, no, excuse me, 91, 92 on, we went to the Bay Area. We arrived right after the 89 earthquake. So by that time, I remember sitting in Chicago watching... No joke. It was crazy. Chicago Cubs versus the San Francisco Giants on those TVs. And I saw like it was shaking. I was like, what's going on? I was hitting the side of my TV. I was doing like the antennas. And little did I know that was the 89 earthquake. Right.
Oh, so the earthquake happened during a game?
During the game. Oh. Yeah. And I was in Chicago. You know what I mean? And so at the time, Giants were playing the A's. And that's the reason why I was like, was a big Chicago Cubs fan at the time. So when my pop said it's time to move to the Bay Area, I'm like, you crazy. There was an earthquake just recently. You know what I mean? But in that time frame in the late 70s, early 80s, I remember walking to the bus stop, going to school, and it was a predominantly African American school. I could count on two hands how many Filipinos were there.
This is in
Virginia.
In Virginia.
Virginia. And walking to our school bus, and I remember walking past these kids on the house. You know what I mean? They were just chilling on the steps, and they was rapping. At the time, I didn't know what rapping was, right? And I just seen kids on the cardboard spinning, and I was so intrigued and fascinated.
This is late 80s.
Late 80s, right? And so, the birth of hip hop was 1973. Right, you know what I mean? But it really didn't blow up until like 78, 79, 80 when the Sugar Hill Gang came out, right? When it became more mainstream, and then Run DMC started coming out and all these things. And I remember just seeing these kids, and they're like, my name is Nate and I'm the great. You know what I mean? They were just very kindergarten rhymes, but I was like, whoa, what is this? And so that's something that got to hook me up. Like, I want to do this rapping thing. You know what I mean? I don't know what that meant, but I wanted to write rhymes. You know what I mean? And so when we moved to the Bay Area, so it was like Virginia to then Chicago, and then finally to the Bay Area. This is now the 90s. This is where like Pinoys were really, the mobile DJs was happening. Breakdancing crews are just big. And I was the rapper. You know what I mean? I was the one who wanted to write rhymes. And so all I did through high school was write rhymes. And I remember walking through through the hallways. No joke. People thought I was talking to myself the whole time. It's like, dude, that guy's strange. That guy's weird. You know what I mean? But I was rapping. Like, I was in my head hearing the beat and making my own rhyme schemes. You know what I mean? Right? And so, you know, hip hop has always been with me since the late 70s, early 80s, all the way to today. And
what high school do you go to?
I went to Antioch High School.
Antioch. Okay.
Yeah, Antioch High School. And it was predominantly whites, Latinx, very few Filipinos, you know what I mean? So all the Filipinos really gravitated together, you know what I mean? We're always kind of stuck together. And so at the times in the 90s, this is also the same time when things like Boys in the Hood, Menace to Society, Dead Presidents came out. And then in the suburbs, there was such just really huge, high rates of gang violence, particularly in the Filipino community. And you're talking about in the suburbs, there's a lot of gang fights, you know what I mean? And so because...
Even out there in Antioch.
In Antioch, oh man, it was hot. I mean, Daly City, San Francisco was hot. But it just percolated all throughout the Bay Area. And I don't know what it was, or people were just kind of like, you know, imitating, you know, gangsters' life, right? But in the suburbs, that's what we had. But the reason why I bring this up is because while all my homies were all gangbanging, I was considered sort of like the conciliar, the counselor / rapper of the group, right? Because anytime you go to house parties, you go with your crew. And sometimes there's a DJ, there's break dancers, b-boys. And if there's an MC battle, they say, yo, Nate, like, hit that microphone. And we hit those garage parties and we would rhyme. You know what I mean? And so I set that up because when I think about Rock the School Bells, right, in hindsight, I never understood the power and impact of hip hop. I wrote because I wanted to express myself. I wrote because I saw a lot of my friends get hurt. 2 of my good friends died. Relationships. I mean, anything that was remotely highly emotive, that was like emotional, sad, angry, depressed, I wanted to write. You know what I mean? In hindsight, I never knew that was something that was therapeutic, something that was able to really make me understand and make meaning of my experiences. You know, when I fast forward to today, I'm like, whoa, hip hop is powerful. And this is why it's important to have Rock the School Bells, right? Is being able to provide the educational experience for students that can really express themselves in many different ways, right? And so Rock the School Bells was born in 2007, right? And it didn't happen. What really sparked and activated the inspiration and the creation of Rock the School Bells was, this is interesting enough, man. I was part of the Kababayan learning community. I'm 2 years in, you know, I'm 2 years out of my graduate school. And Liza, who's the Kababayan coordinator, you know, brought me on to be to be her counselor. And I wanted to do something centered around hip hop, Filipinos and hip hop. So that year we just caught wind that Blue Scholars was coming to the Bay to perform. And at the time, Blue Scholars wasn't big. You know, they had a good following, but they weren't as big as they are now, or, you know, when they were performing. So we brought our students downtown San Francisco. You know, I remember seeing Sabzi and Gio coming in with their luggage. In their luggage, they had the equipment and all that. They have their merchandise, you know what I mean? Their Blue Scholars graffiti T-shirt, OG, right? And when they did the performance, all my students were just like, whoa, what is this? This is hip hop. This is so fresh. How come they don't never hear this on the radio? And I was like, well, that's a good question. Why do you think they don't air or put Blue Scholars or other artists out on the radio? And so we had a very deep conversations about who controls the media, who controls the radio airwaves, like what messages do they want to highlight, right? You know what I mean? And so I said, what you want to do about it? I was like, man, see, this is good hip hop. You know, the radio's making a bad rap about hip hop. And I just kept pushing back. Yo, kids, what you want to do about it? So we need to educate our community. I said, how you want to do that? Man, we got to throw a conference or a workshop or something. You know what I mean? I said, okay, cool. So there's a little grant that's coming up. Let's write this grant for a hip hop conference and see where this goes. So 20 of my Kababayan students, we sat in a room. We had dialogue, conversations about what this conference will look like, because we had to put this budget proposal for the grant, right? So it's super detailed. This is the workshops we're looking at. This is the amount of money we need. And when we submitted it a couple, 3 weeks later, it gets accepted. And we're just like, whoa. Hey, yo, this is my first grant I ever wrote, bro. So I'm like, what? We doing something? So I remember it was just a minor budget, small budget, right? But essentially, we wanted to produce Rock the School Bells because we wanted to give students a space to engage in hip hop in multiple ways, right? We want them to leverage and acknowledge their stories. We wanted them to learn about the history and culture of hip hop that is counter to what mainstream America is painting hip hop to be. Right. And so we had to go back to the roots, right? The history and the culture. So we wanted to be able to educate our community about that. So there was many different things that we wanted to include, right? The 4 elements of hip hop. So having students engage in those different things. So we wanted to have that space where students understand what hip hop is, but at the same time find themselves in this space of higher education. Right. I think that was the big thing, was how do we integrate hip hop in higher education, which seemingly looks at 2 different things. Like, how do you converge these 2 different things when education closes the door on hip hop? Well, hip hop's going to break down the door by ways of Rock the School Bells. And one of the ways we need to do that is what I call upset the setup, right? Because we know all too long in education that the educational systems don't serve the needs of communities of color. Right, we've gone through this K through 12 system, having to experience education where whiteness is centered. Right, everything else is counter, everything is other, everything is exotic. Right, but how do we begin to center our own culture, particularly hip hop, as the core, as the thing that this is our culture and this is what we need to say. This is my education, and so Rock the School Bells began to manifest in that way and began to grow, really. So Rock the School Bells was born in 2007 as a direct result of a conversation that we had with our students of Kababayan.
A little backtrack. How did you get into counseling and education? Because you said you finished your master's over at SF State.
Yeah.
How did you get from that hip hop loving, middle school, high school, that I read in Empire of Funk? Shout out to Mark Villegas. And you talk about how your dad was very strict. Navy told you when you did a performance that, hey, where's the future in this hip hop, right? And then you recently mentioned that after your counseling program, you ended up at Skyline and started the Rock the School Bells. What's that space in between? How did you get from Antioch into counseling?
Yeah, man, that's a great question. I graduated in 1999 with my bachelor's degree in psychology. From San Francisco State.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm a Gator for life, man. Doing the bachelor's, the master's, the doctorate, all that state. There's something about SF. It's beautiful.
He said, sorry, bachelor's in
psychology.
Why'd you choose that at first?
It's funny because like prior to that, right after high school, I went to Diablo Valley College, a community college over there in Pleasant Hill, right? And just like any college student who coming out of high school, didn't have a plan, didn't know what I want to do. I was so engaged in like, want to do this music thing, right? Want to be hip hop, want to rap, right? That, education wasn't at the forefront, but I went to college because I had to, right? All my friends went to Los Medanos College in Pittsburgh, right?
E-Town.
P-Town. Shout out to the Pirates. And no disrespect to the Pirates, but I didn't want to be too close to home. So I moved to the college further, a little bit further, DVC, right? Which is what, 10, 15 minutes or 15, 20 minutes away from LMC, because LMC was in my backyard. You know, it's like the extension of high school, right? You're like, oh, man, gotta see you again for another 4 years. You know what I mean? Yeah. So when I was at DVC, I just had no idea what I wanted to get into, right? And so, you know, fast forward, this is really connected to actually counseling, to come to think about it. Thank you, Kuya Chris, for letting me process this moment here right now. Man, so this is a trip, man. So right across the street from
Wait, this was the 90s.
In the 90s, right? So I graduated from high school 95, went to DVC 96, 97, right? In DVC, and literally 2 blocks from DVC is this mall called Sun Valley Mall, okay? And I always have beef about that. Like if I was like a city planner, you never want to put a mall next to a college. Man, you're asking for trouble. Why? At least for me. You know what I mean? Like, most of my classes in the community college was in the mall. What? Sorry, moms. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And this is when Street Fighter 2 was coming out. Right? So, you know, I'm saving my lunch money for arcades and everything. So, all that to say is that I didn't do too well during my first year of college, right? One, my priorities wasn't straight. 2, I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know what I mean? Because this is college. And it's like, you don't know what the class is. 3, I'm the first generation, first to go to college. No understanding what it means to navigate college, right? All I could remember, anything college related, particularly coming from my pops, is like, you need to be a doctor, you need to be an engineer, you be a lawyer. And when you hear that all throughout your entire life, you almost put a sort of like a barrier between that, right? Because, you know, part of you wants to do something, and then you're being forced upon, your parents to do certain things. Like, you know, the automatic thing I wanted to do is sort of like push back and resist. You know what I mean? He kept doctor. That's all he would say is doctor. And I just like, I don't want to ever be a doctor, man. Like, that's not me. And so going to college, I had no direction, you know? So
for context, you're the oldest of 4 siblings, right?
I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. And so this is a trip, man. So after 1 year, a year and a half, I visited a counselor because I started to see my friends starting to graduate or transfer to 4 universities. I'm like, oh, man, I'm getting left behind. So I go to see my very first counseling experience, Chris. First, it took a year and a half.
Of being at DVC.
Being at DVC. Okay. Like, what was you doing, Nate, for 3-4 semesters, man? How do you pick classes? How do you know? I don't know. I don't even remember. When I look at my transcript, I'm like, damn, I took basketball 3 times in 1 semester. How's that? You know, no direction. So I see this counselor, and I remember her to this day. She looks at my transcript, and she looks at me, and she says, very jokingly, your transcript looks like a website address. I was like, what do you mean? Like all these W's.
Withdrawal?
You know what I mean? It's like withdrawals, www. And I was like, that was wrong. But what happened after that?
She said it looks like an address.
Yo.
Address.
I was like, first of all, like, come on, man. I'm already feeling bad about myself. Like, I'm not intelligent enough to be in college. And then she got, right? That's crazy, right? Like, you a counselor and you telling me this.
That's some good shit, though. Yeah.
Right? You know what I mean? I was like, wow. And so, like, I was like baffled. And then what she said afterwards was what hit me to my soul, honestly. And she's like, I don't think you belong in college, man. Like, you're not taking this serious. Like, this is not for you. And I remember when I heard that, because everybody was telling me, you got to see your counselor, you got to see your counselor. And my only counseling experience I remember was in high school. It was never the best experience. So I kind of aligned my understanding of counseling in high school the same way I aligned it with college. And so when she had said that, that I'm not college material, it made me reflect on what my high school counselor, they would say the same thing. And so when you're a young kid like that and you're already you don't have the greatest confidence in yourself in education, that is reinforcing what you're thinking about yourself. And so what makes it even harder is that she's a person that's in a position of power and privilege, right? She's a counselor, so she's supposed to know, right? So for her to say that was like, oh, damn, maybe she is right. Maybe like, I'm not good at college. So I go across the street, drop out of school, because my GPA was on academic probation, right? So they told me that I can't continue unless I bring my grades up. And so I was acting on emotion. I went across the street, got a full-time job at the mall, at the shoe store called Track and Trail. Remember Track and Trail? You ever remember Track and Trail was like, that's where you got the sickest Timberlands, man. You know, when I'm watching old school Rap City, you know, on BET, Wu-Tang Clan, all the East Coast rapper, camouflage hand with the Timberlands. I was like, ooh, the Timberlands. So I knew I wanted to work at Track and Trail, right? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, Timbs all day. You know,
isn't it crazy? Timbs are still kicking to this day. It's
all
still
day.
Part of the culture, man.
It's
That's
timeless.
Crazy. It's crazy.
And
people don't want to crease them.
No. They walk funny. That's what you got. I already walk funny as is. And then you got Timberlands that's like twice as funny. Right? Yeah. So I bring up Track and Trail for a very good reason, because this is one, and I like to always tell with my students, in your life, you always will experience pivots. Right? Pivots are those moments where you know, like, man, I need to redirect my energies, or I need to change directions, right? When you pivot to the left, pivot to the right. And so this is one of my earlier pivots in terms of how I arrived to becoming a counselor. So I already shared with you my horrible experience with my college counselor. So I'm now at Sun Valley Mall working at Track and Trail. My parents don't know this.
Oh, so
right?
They think you're still going
exactly,
to college.
Which is partly why I went to Sun Valley Mall, because I'm driving to Pleasant Hill. So they think I'm driving to school, but I'm really driving to work. Like, why are you always with your white shirt and khakis? That's the uniform and everything. Yeah. It's like, no, khakis is what's in today, moms. You know what I mean? But I'm actually going to work. So I remember this moment, the pivot. So at Track and Trail, I don't know what it's like in other shoe stores, but when a customer wants a shoe, you go back there, you grab the shoe that they want, but you also grab two other types of shoes that's kind of similar to it. Man, you want to upsell, right? And so, this person wanted this. I'm going to give them this Timberlands. It's a little bit more, right? You're always upselling, right? So the other piece that you also got to do is that you also got to put the boot on their foot, right? That's like the full process, package, the whole customer service, tie the laces, whatever, you know what I mean? Adjust the feet, whatever. It's like, how does it feel? You need to adjust this a little bit. So, we're like it's a full process. And so when I got this guy, I was doing the same process with this one dude, this white guy. He looks down at me, looks at the boots, and then he kicks off his boot off his shoe, right, off his foot. He kicks it off, looks at me, and mind you, I'm on the ground, like just, kneeling down, like putting on the shoe. And he looks down at me and says, "Put that shit back on." I was like, "What?" Put my shoe back on my foot. And I looked up to him and I was like, am I really? I was baffled. I was like, am I really hearing this? Put my shoe back on my foot. And that was the pivot. That was the moment where I said to myself in that split second, looking up to this guy, it's like, if I'm going to look up to somebody, I want to aspire to be that somebody. And that's the last time I'm going to look up to somebody physically that's really, disrespecting me. And I said to him, "You can put your own damn shoe on." And I walked out. My boss was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Man, I quit." So I quit that day. No plan, nothing. But I knew how I felt, like I was disrespected. I was like, nah, this is not going to happen. right? And I think I wrote a song about that. I gotta find that.
We gotta find that. Remix it.
Yeah. I gotta find it in the Book of Rhymes. But that was the pivot, really. So that essentially got me thinking, like, damn, I quit my job. I got disrespected. Now I'm like, what am I gonna do with my life now? You know what I mean? So I went back to school, which ironically, the person that really inspired me to go to class and do the work is actually in the doctoral program with me. So, I mean,
full circle,
major shout out. So
did you know this person from high school?
Yeah. She was, she lived in Pittsburgh. I was out in Antioch. And so we had sort of like the same circle of friends. She was in the same major as me in psychology. So I decided to go back to psychology. And I was, sometimes, I got lucky, right? Because as a counselor, I never say, go to class and go to the same classes that your friends go to, right? You know what I mean? Like, what class? Yo, Chris, what classes are you going to take? I'm going to take the same class as you. I know we have different majors, but let me, you know what I mean?
Hey, they still do that to this day,
right?
Man.
They do. And I did that. But this was sort of like, a lucky stroke, a stroke of good luck there, because I happened to be in the same psychology class as this professor who really just opened my eyes of the field of psychology. The ways in which he taught the class was like so different and so unique. I couldn't remember exactly how he taught. I just remember going there wanting to learn more. I was very, and it also allowed me to self-reflect and process like why my life is the way it is. How are my relationships like? Why my pops have not good of a relationship, right? It just made me reflect, and I found myself being much more stronger in that. And so I made a decision that psychology was going to be my major, and then transferring to San Francisco State. You know what I mean? So, so fast forward to San Francisco State, I'm earning my my psychology degree. I didn't complete my minor in Asian American Studies because I was like, I'm trying to dip out. I can't take any more classes. I'm just being completely 100. Yes, but the Asian American Studies that I did take really changed my life. And, I did Filipino psychology, behavior and psych for Filipinos. I did Asian American community with Dan Gonzalez. I mean, these are some folks that really inspired me and really got me connected to my Filipino roots. When I was growing up in Antioch, man, there was no semblance and understanding of the history and culture of the Philippines, right? Other than what I've learned from my parents. And that was just very minimal, right? Because like many parents, and I can't speak for all families, but, my pops being in the U.S. Navy, my mom, being a nurse, they just wanted to assimilate into the community. And the best way they wanted to do that is just to learn the language of the land that you're inhabiting right now, right? Do what they do, because that's how you become successful. And so when I went to San Francisco State to take those classes, I was like, whoa, this Filipino culture, this history is like, it added another layer of like my understanding of self. And it gave power. Like when I was at the community college, I was I don't know if I was full on depressed, but I didn't love myself. You know what I mean? Like I've been surrounded by all this victimization of people saying that I can't do things and I'm not good enough or I'm not smart enough. Meanwhile, having the pressures, the familiar and parental pressures of being the top of the class. And so there's this tension between those two. And so you begin to question yourself, right? And so when I was taking those classes at San Francisco State and learning about my history and culture, I started to gain that power, to gain that understanding, that resiliency from all of the different stories, the heroes, teachers that really inspired me along the way. And it got me wanting to be part of this Filipino community, right? Wanting to work with the veteranos, wanted me to understand the life of the cicadas. Like it really pushed me in a direction where I wanted to help. And that was the thing, help. How do you uplift your communities? How do you support each other? How do you have this spirit of community existing in any place that you go to? And so for the first time in my life, I had a direction, right? I graduated now with my psychology degree, but really didn't know what I wanted to do with it. But I had a semblance of some kind of direction. As with many people, getting a degree, bachelor's degree is sometimes people joke, and I think there's some truth to it. Like it's it's this year's high school diploma, right? And so that happened to me in '99 when I graduated. I found finding a job very difficult. I was working odd jobs, trying to get some experience in the field of psychology. And what I struggled with a lot of places that I was applying to, it was really centered around whiteness. Like psychology is about like this very white Eurocentric ways of doing and ways of being. And that never resonated with me, right? Because what I've learned in Asian American studies was like we have our own indigenous healing practices, right? But oftentimes in white America is exotified. Like it's like this magical wizardry, right? But but for us, it is the way of being, it's the way of doing, it's the way of healing, right? And so I just couldn't find a place where I found like a sense of belonging in psychology in these different clinics, hospitals, nonprofit organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So, I got to live. And so I then, found a job at the airport, SFO airport. Come on, I got a bachelor's degree in psychology and now I'm working at the airport as a terminal supervisor in the United Wing in Terminal 3, right? And so I'm like, man, and I was making good money, Chris, man. I was making mad loot. And that was enough for me to kind of forget my worries a little bit, right? Like, okay, I got my bachelor's in psychology, but I'm making all this loot and I could travel for free all over the place. Man, I can get down with this. You know what I mean? I can use my psychology in terms of customers relation. I could flip it however I need to flip it. That's cool with me, right? And so I was doing good. And then 9/11 hits. And I remember getting this phone call in the morning, and it was like my district manager, and he had said, "Don't show up to work." I was like, "What do you mean? Don't show up to work, man. Turn on the TV. You see what's going on? Turn on the TV." And I was like, I felt like I was in a dream, yo. I mean, I'm just seeing footage, channel after channel after channel, seeing footage of the building burning.
How old were you at this time?
Man, 2011. I was like 24. 2001, 24. I think it was 24 years old. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? I just never seen it. I thought it was in a movie. I was able to get back in to work the following day, but at that time, all the security measures was ramped up. Like my badge wouldn't work. I had to go through this door to that door, that aisle to that. It just, going to work was just such a struggle, right? You know what I mean? In hindsight, I feel bad. Like I was tripping about like having to go to work. Meanwhile, people are dying and everything. So, when you put things in perspective, like that was nothing compared to like what people or families were suffering from then, and even the communities that are being targeted at the time. So I was like, I don't know if I want to continue to do this work every day. And so I hit another pivot, like a pivot of, I don't know, man. I don't know if this is for me forever. This is definitely not my forever job. So when I was working, I get these buddy passes, these United buddy passes. And so I figured, man, before they start like not being able to use those buddy passes, let me use it now before TSA or the airports like say it's not eligible. So I took a trip to Hawaii for the very first time, trip to Hawaii, to do a soul search trip. And I made a commitment to go out there and say, I'm going to go out there. I'm going to look for answers. I went there with a backpack, flip-flops, just one bag, didn't even have any lodging. No, I didn't. I went just like my life is no plan. Sometimes I just go, right? And I hop on the plane on standby, finally got a seat, flew to Honolulu for the first time, landed, not knowing where I'm going to go next, took the taxi to Waikiki just to walk because I was like, that's all I knew about Hawaii at the time, Waikiki. Walked around, just kind of exploring the city. And every night, I would, two of the nights, the first 2 nights I slept on the beach.
Really?
Had no lodging. And then I remember security, like chef flashing the light, you know what I mean? Like move, like get up. So I moved to a different part of the beach. You know what I mean?
Really?
Yeah. And I wake up. Yeah.
Damn, what the fuck? 2002, 2001?
That was 2002. So 2001, 2002.
Damn. And it's already touristed out. I would not have thought to do that like type of trip over there.
Yeah. No, so, day 3, I met up with some locals, man, like, and they were like saying,
so you didn't know anyone there?
I didn't know anybody, bro. I just flew. I just went. You know what I mean?
Why did you choose Hawaii? Because
I don't know. I always wanted to go to Hawaii. You know what I mean? And if I got this buddy pass, and in my head, like I was like, what would be a great place to go to if you're trying to like search for answers, right? And I immediately thought about the ocean. You know what I mean? I thought of sunsets.
Yep.
You know what I mean? I thought about the beach, right? And so, Hawaii was the first thing that came to mind. And and I said to myself, I'll have a whole week to kind of figure this out. You know what I mean? I told my work, look, I'm going to be out for a week. I'll come back. Right. And so day 3 in Hawaii, I met up with some locals. Right. And so, they had some nice greenery. We're just chilling and we started talking. And then they were like, you're not from here? Like they were talking in pidgin, talking to me like I'm from there. And they said, you're not from here. And so how can you tell? Like your accent, you have this very interesting accent, like talking to me. Right. And so I was like, yeah, I'm from the Bay Area. And so what you doing out here? I was just like, I didn't want to share too much, but I said, I'm just here kicking it, just trying to find a place. And they was hospitable enough to invite me to stay with them for the rest of the trip. Right. And so I was super blessed to have like cats that out of nowhere just say, hey, man, come chop game with us. And so what happened was they took me on our way to North Shore, the east side going to North Shore. They took me up there and then we stopped by, and I'll remember this because this was a huge part of why I made this decision to go into counseling was we pulled to the side of the road, and on this beach were so many tents of people. And I was like, damn, people camping out in Hawaii. And I remember vividly that a lot of these folks were wearing these bright yellow t-shirts. And you're talking about the elders, the kids, the whole family, they were all wearing these white t-shirts. And on the back of the t-shirt read, keep the country. And so I'd asked the locals, the kids, the folks I was with, and they were just kind of like sharing me my first understanding of the sovereignty movement that was happening. And they're, the protecting the Aina, the protecting of the land. And so I went out there just out of curiosity. I wanted to just chop it up with them. And I met this elder. He was over there fishing in the ocean. It's crazy because they had this makeshift stick. It was so cool. He just tied this little fishing line. It was just a stick, and he was catching some cool little fishes. So I was like, dang. And we started talking, and he talked about how him and his family got displaced, right? Because this company wanted to build something. And so they applied pressure to this community. Essentially, they pushed the communities out. And so they were promised housing, a housing development. In the meantime, when they were in tents, this is sort of like a temporary place for them to stay. And as I went here's this story, I was like very, it was very sad. I was very like, I felt hopeless because I wanted to help so bad. And I remember telling the elder, I said, man, I want to help. How can I help you? How can I help this community? And he kind of laughs, you know what I mean? Like, as if it's like, you can't really help me, but thanks for asking. But he said to me, and I would never forget this. He says, you already are. I was like, what? He said, you're listening to us. You're allowing us to share our stories. You know what I mean? It's as if a coconut hit my head. Like, wow. It was like beautiful. Like, wow. And to see him smile at that moment, knowing that someone took the time to hear the stories, that was so profound to me. It just made me understand how deep it is when we develop these authentic relationships with people who often are silenced or invisible. And so, you know, the place now it is what, or their former home is now what we call the extended version of Turtle Bay Resort, which is why every time I drive by Turtle Bay Resort, I give them the middle finger every time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you took people's lands because you want to build an extension to their golf course. You know what I mean? Like that to me was very disheartening. And so that made me wake up a little bit. That made me understand, like, this idea of listening to people's stories is something I want to do. I don't know how, I don't know what. And so when I arrived back to the Bay, 2 weeks after that, I quit my job, and with no plan. It's like, what am I going to do? I'm going to quit my job. And I had this like conversation with folks, and people would say to me, yo, Nate, you're really good with people, man. You know, why don't you do a high school counseling or be a counselor or be something like you're good with kids, you know? And so I started applying for jobs. I found some after school programs at San Francisco, working with some youth. And I was like, damn, I like this. You know, they allowed me to be creative, you know, work with students and kids with different projects that are creative and innovative. And then someone said, well, why don't you just do your master's degree? Like let's take this to the next level. And so all throughout my time, Chris, man, DVC and San Francisco State, you know, my priorities wasn't the greatest, man. And so I always share this with my students. And as a result of it, my GPA wasn't the best, right? I graduated from DVC with a 2.2, barely made it. Graduated from San Francisco State with a 2.4, 2.5, you know, barely made it. I just wanted to give the piece of paper to my parents. You know, I was like, I did it, you know, not really having a real direction. And so the reason I bring that up is because I kind of hurt myself a little bit trying to apply to master's programs, because a lot of them was minimum 3.0. And so I was like, I was now at a crossroads, like, man, ain't no graduate program's going to accept me with this GPA. And someone told me about San Francisco State master's program in counseling, and they said, hey, just apply. And people just told me, just apply. So I applied, and I'm one of the very few candidates of counseling in that program, in the entire history of that program, that had to do a panel interview. Essentially what it is, like, most people traditionally apply, you get accepted, you're in, or denied, you're out. For me, you got conditionally accepted. Now you got to go to a panel interview. And at the time, they said I was probably the fourth or fifth person that had to do that. And the reason why that happens is because there's one person on the committee that was trying to advocate for me, right? Look past the GPA kind of thing. So they invited me to this panel interview. I felt like American Idol. There was three of them, man. Like, you got, you know, there's two women on a panel, and then this Filipino cat in the middle. And the woman on the right, she's an Asian woman who was the department chair. And I remember her saying this to me, and I was like, damn, can't believe she said this to me. She said, like, it was very condescending. She was like, did you read the application, like the requirements? I was like, I'm sure I did, which is why I applied, you know what I mean? And she's like, do you know what the GPA requirement is? And I'm like, oh, okay. So we're going to play that now. It's like, yeah, I decided to try to apply anyways. You know, it's a 3.0, right? And I was like, I know, but I have a story to tell. And so the guy in the middle, this Filipino cat, was like, but did you read his personal statement? Like, that's the type of person we want in the program. And I was like, just kind of nodding my head. I'm like, hopeful. And then the lady says to me, well, why don't you go wait in the lobby and we're going to deliberate. I'm like, man. And so I walk out to the lobby, Chris, and I kid you not, like my inner victim, like having these messages of you're going to fail, you're not good enough, you know, this is not for you, like was all circulating through my head. And for a quick minute there, I was thinking like, I'm just going to bounce. I was going to let the lady know at the front desk, like, that's cool, I'm out. But something told me to stay, right? So they invited me back in, and they said, you know what? We're going to accept you, but it's going to be a conditional acceptance. We're going to place you on academic probation. I'm like, again? I'm like, man, I'm on academic probation in DVC, academic probation in San Francisco State when I was doing my bachelor's. I mean, this is nothing new to me. Come on.
At least you're consistent.
Come on, man. Like, yo, what's up? Like, academic probation, you like, you won't scare me. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so what does that mean? Like, I was like, what does that really mean, though? Basically, they told me is that I have to get a minimum 3.0 and no classes. You can't get a C. Even though C is passing, you can't get a C in that class, right? And I was like, dang. So all these GPAs started popping in my head. 2.2 DVC, 2.4 San Francisco State. And you want me to get A's and B's at this highly, like this higher educational level? Like, oh, snaps. But I was reflecting back on my conversation with the elder in Hawaii and all the conversations that I had with homies who really supported me along the way. And I said, no, I got to do it for them. I got to do it for the kids. I got to do it for the folks in Hawaii. I got to do it for my family. So I said, okay, maybe this is the universe's way of saying, we're giving you a shot. We're giving you an opportunity. Take it. So I took it. What's supposed to be a 3-year program, Chris, I did it in 2. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't want to try to be in school for too long. And I graduated with a 3.75 GPA. I wasn't messing around. You know what I'm saying? And so that's how I became a counselor, right? That's my trajectory. All the experiences that led up to this point led me to become a counselor, all because I was wanting to ensure that the people, the youth, the students that I serve, that their stories matter, right? That they see power in their own stories, because oftentimes they don't. And I could take that, you know, for myself. I never believed in myself. I never believed that my story and my experiences mattered or worth mentioning, but it was a part of it. It's a part of who we are. You know what I'm saying? It's the badges that we wear, the scars that we live through. You know what I mean? And so that's how I got into counseling, man.
What gave you that wherewithal throughout that process, right? You said you would have some support from friends like that. What kind of pushed you against the imposter syndrome that would come up, both from, you know, you shared a while ago about pressure from your family to do exceptionally well, but then coming up to the systems and the institutions, hearing pushback from them too. So you're like being pushed in two opposing ways and not really knowing where your center is. How did you find that center? How did you find that support throughout that process to get you through? Because, you know, this is a multiple year type of story.
Yeah.
Right? So what was the consistency there that like kept you going?
Yeah. I think the best way I could describe it, the 3 H's is hustle, help, and hip hop. And let me first start with the hustle. I think hustle is something that was definitely ingrained in me. You know what I mean? It was part of my DNA. So I was the type of kid that if you told me that I couldn't do it, I'll still try to do it, even if I fail. You know what I mean? And that doesn't dismiss the fact that I still like didn't believe that I can. But I think the hustle was a way for me to disguise that imposter syndrome. It's like, I'm gonna show you I can do this. Even though in my mind I might fail though. You know what I mean? And so that hustle was always ingrained in me. The help piece for me, having a few set of friends that like you can turn to that believes in you, I think is extremely important. Right. You know, and I share this with my students all the time, is that you always have to surround yourself with folks that can lift you up, that are, you know, in a higher realm where you can aspire to. You know what I mean? I'm always drawn to this idea of like the law of association. You know what I mean? Where, you know, you are the sum of whom you surround yourselves with, right? You know what I mean? And in many ways, I kind of believe some of that notion around the law of association, right? And so I needed to understand that there's certain folks that I love and I'm down with, but I knew that those are the folks that might hold me back, right? And so I had to make a conscious decision to recreate this circle of folks that I know that's gonna, you know, help and push me. You know what I mean? And that doesn't mean that I gotta cut the roots, right, of family members or homies that I'm down with, right, I still got mad love, right? I just knew that I had a purpose, a higher purpose. I didn't know what it was at that time, but I just knew I just had to do me. And the thing that folks got to understand about me is like, you know, I'm an independent hustler. Like I don't mind having to work things out on my own if I have to, right? But you can only go so far when you're doing that by yourself, man. And I've learned that very quickly. You know what I mean? Like, to go with folks collectively in the same direction makes things so much easier and so much more manageable, right? But it's important to find those right people. So the hustle, the help, and then hip hop for me was sort of like the escape, right? As I mentioned, I wrote a lot. And so in many ways, you know, being able to write was very therapeutic. It was cathartic. You know what I mean? I know that if I don't write something down, that it boils up in me, that it might manifest in ways that could be very destructive. And I didn't want that to happen. You know what I mean? And so I wrote a lot, you know, and so, you know, I'm pretty bummed out because I wanted to bring my book of rhymes, you know, that I was trying to bring onto the show over here. But that was my way of really expressing my angst, my stress, my anxiety, my hunger, my anger, everything. Right. And so, which is why I truly, 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 really believe in the power of hip hop. You know, when we're talking about how do you navigate your struggles? How do you advocate for yourself in times of crisis and challenges? Right. And so, like, that was something, and I'm not going to say that I knew that, you know, from the get go. These are notions or concepts that I began to hone and refine over a number of years through a series of experiences.
So throughout those, like the undergraduate, graduate school, you were still writing rhymes.
Yeah.
The whole time.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, you know, we were talking about spoken word, right? Like it's crazy. First of all, my spoken word name, people call me back in the early 90s, Nate Diggs.
Nate
D-I-G-double-G-S. And it was interesting because, you know, when I was in the spoken word circuit, you know, I used to perform a lot in San Francisco State, at the Depot, you know, if you know the Depot at SF State.
Right next to the bar.
You know, remember the first spam back in the day. But just traveling and doing a lot of spoken word. And I remember after doing a piece, this lady comes up to me and she's like, "Oh my God, you are like that dude from Love Jones." And if you ever watch Love Jones, Jones, man, you got to put that on your queue. Okay. Love Jones.
Love Jones. Is it on Netflix? What is it?
I hope so. You know, she was like, "Man, you remind me of Taye Diggs." I was like, "Taye Diggs? Taye Diggs wasn't in Love Jones. That was Lorenz Tate." And then she looks at me, "Well, I don't care. You're Nate Diggs." And so, you know, homies would be like, "Oh, she called you Nate Diggs," but that kind of stuck, right? Because it had a nice little ring to it. Taye Diggs was big, right, at the time. And so Love Jones was the movie, you know, that really was like sparking that spoken word movement, you know, really putting out in the mainstream. And Nate Diggs kind of became my name ever since. And so with that being said, because I was part of a group called Untitled back in San Francisco State. I was second generation. I was the second year, right? So Untitled, our people, essentially, you know, was a drum circle, right? At San Francisco State, led by the retired professor Dan Begonia. And so, you know, if you're a part of Dan Gonzalez's class, you know, Allison's class or Dan Begonia's class or anybody that's affiliated with Asian American Studies, specifically in Filipino American Studies, you might have crossed paths with being part of a drum circle called Ating Tao. And we would drum in all the different community events, you know, when we're going to the Immigrants' Rights March, the Veteran Honor events, any kind of event that we needed to be at, we were there, you know, with our drum circle. I remember performing at the Carnival. I was the guy with the bass drum, Chris, the big bass drum. Can you imagine marching Carnival Mission? I don't know how long that is. I was like, when we gonna stop? Can we rest? You know what I mean? But all the adrenaline, right? So I think Thou was a drum circle, but I was the spoken word poet of I think Thou, right? I was selected to be the person to write the anthem of I think Thou, right? And so, man, I wish I had the book too. Do you have the Kababayan book here? There was like short stories, Amen Cuento.
I think I have number 2.
Oh, number 2.
Yeah,
so volume 1, Amen Cuento, has the anthem of Ating Thou. And that was that's the one I was looking for. I wanted to bring and kind of share here today. But that was, that was my time at San Francisco State doing spoken word. And I bring that up is because a lot of my spoken word pieces was centered around Filipino identity, struggle, history, culture. And so now you're seeing this sort of intersection between hip hop and Filipino identity. I was like, yo, where are my Filipino hip hop artists at? Right. And so, and there was very few at the time. Right? Can you imagine? I'm coming from Antioch, DVC, all about hip hop. Then I'm learning about my history and culture at the Filipino studies, and now I'm like trying to merge the two. It's like, who's the folks that I look up to? Where, you know what I mean? And I remember my very first, I don't know if it was my very first Filipino album. Might have been my first that I went all the way through, was Kiwi's very first album, called Rites of Passage. And I didn't know Kiwi at the time. And I was like, damn, Rites of Passage. And what drew me to his album was there was a young picture of a kid, and that was Kiwi as a young child. And then juxtaposed in the background was like kind of transparent was, I believe, him as an adult. Right. It kind of reminded me of Nas's album. Right. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this is sick. And so from track 1 all the way to the end, I was like, yo, he's speaking about my experience. Right. And so when you think about hip hop in general, you think about the greatest storytellers like Nas and Biggie, you're like, yo, those are dope. They're telling the stories about the neighborhood where they're from, Queens and Brooklyn. And then here I am learning about my own history. I'm like, well, where am I in this in hip hop? Where am I? Because all I know about Filipinos in hip hop at the time was we was DJing and we was breakdancing. But me as a writer, I was struggling to find voice, right? Even though I was writing myself, I didn't see nobody there like that was making it, right? And I'm sure there was many more artists that existed, right? Because I know Los Angeles had a big hip hop scene, Filipino hip hop scene, but in the Bay Area, Kiwi was the first one. And then Kiwi led to the Native Guns. And man, when we were doing that community work, Native Guns, they were sort of like our, they would hype us up. Anytime we go to movements and mobilizations, like Native Guns would always be the one that just hypes us up and get us going. Then I got introduced to things like Magnetic North, you know what I mean? Introduced to one of the very first Asian American crew, the Mountain Brothers. When I heard the song Galaxies, 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 I was like, oh, snaps. Like Asians in hip hop, and then now Filipinos in hip hop, right? When you think about Filipinos in hip hop today, like it's huge. I mean, Ruby Ibarra, it's like on a whole different level, you know what I mean? But back then, it was very few, far in between, right? Even during that time when we were trying to do hip hop, MCing, like I said, it was DJing and breakdancing, but we also had the R&B groups, right? You know what I mean? And that was very like up front and center, right? It was very few rappers, right? And so for me, it was very powerful to kind of hear someone actually produce an album, talk about our stories. And so I knew right then and there that there is a place for Filipinos, Filipino American identity to exist in hip hop culture. You know what I mean? And so I don't have to necessarily have to listen to all these other artists who I enjoy and admire, but never spoke to my experiences, man.
So as a segue, since we were talking about spoken word, you have a little spoken word piece for us. Could you share a little bit of that Nate Diggs throwback for us so we can kind of hear your voice through the spoken word?
Yeah, will do. This is titled Legacy. I wrote this piece, I want to say 3 years ago. Just really recognizing that we come from somewhere, right? That we are legacy. Legacy are the imprints we leave behind for many generations to find and redefine. It's evolution, like transitions from the 6th step to the windmills drop down to a head spin. I'm repping like MCs huddled together on a cold, blistery Chicago night, spitting rhymes that are hotter than the fire that surrounds them. We are the writers that sprays on walls, carves on classroom desks with textures and colors not only to be seen, but also to be heard. We are the scientists of wax manipulating sound through scratches and reverbs to create something amazing from something great. We are the legacies that grows like roses in concrete. We are the community of dancers, the litany of artists, the congregation of MCs, the local record shops. It is you, it is me, it is we. We are legacy. See, African knew science and mathematics. The Egyptian built the pyramids. Then they were thrown onto ships. The white men rewrote their narratives. We see these stories play out in classrooms planted in the minds of our youth. The erasure of their history, systematically hiding them from the truth. We are not the counter narratives. We are the narrative. Our narrative should never be the alternatives, but the imperative. We are not the counter. We are the dominant. We're not the question. We're the period that stamps out prominence. We are history. We are evolution. We are resistance and resolution. We're the embodiment of our ancestors. We are legacy.
Nate Diggs! Legacy. When I was thinking about that, this is a perfect segue, actually. It works. Because you call each year of the CIPHER community a legacy, right? Legacy 1. Do I get it right?
Yeah,
right?
legacy.
Legacy 1, legacy 2, like that. Okay, so could you give a little context about CIPHER? Because I want to dive into the CIPHER.
Yes, sir.
So CIPHER is a learning community out in Skyline College that was launched specifically to use hip-hop in the higher ed and college environment and classes.
Yes.
Right. And could you give a little more context about how that started and all?
Absolutely. I mean, so Rock the School Bells, we started in 2007, right? And so every time we do the conference, right, we do evaluations, right? You know what I mean? And part of the evaluations is to really discover, like, what would hip hop be like if it were to be on a college campus. And overwhelmingly, students said, if you have hip hop in your campus, we will come to your school, right? Or we would come to college in general, right? And so 7 years later, 7 years later, Rock the School Bells 2014, students would always come up to me and say, man, I came to Skyline College because of Rock the School Bells, but where's the hip hop learning community? Is there anything for us? And so we would have these kind of conversations for 3-4 years. And I always say, well, just wait till next year for the next Rock the School Bells. And so that didn't sit well with me, right? Having to tell people or tell students like, no, we don't have any spaces of hip hop here on this campus. You have to wait till next year to do a Rock the School Bells. And that to me was unacceptable because we may be losing students, right, along the way who's really looking at hip hop as a way to engage them in higher education. So I brought up to administration in 2013, and made my pitch. Like, look, I came up with my budget. I came with my plan. I came up with the evaluations, the testimonies, the narratives that our students were sharing, right? I told the VP at the time, vice president, I said, we need to create the CIPHER. We need this. The community need this. And she wrote it off. She said, let's do it. In 2014. So CIPHER was born in 2014 to create a learning community, a community of learners to learn about the history and culture of hip hop while simultaneously also, completing their general education requirements, right? You know what I mean? We just didn't want to have an educator experience where you just go to school and do your GEs, do your major requirements. What we wanted to do is create that same thing, because we all know students have to do their English, they got to do history, they do mathematics. But what if we contextualize it in a way that's going to really engage them in their own learning process, right? And so hip hop was definitely that way of making that happen. And so CIPHER was born in 2014. And so there was like, well, we don't want to just call them cohort of students, right? And so Kim and I were just kind of discussing like, what kind of community should we name them every year? And so I believe she was the one who said legacy. And I agreed. I was like, yeah, legacy. That's what's up. Legacy 1, legacy 2. And the reason we wanted to say legacy was because a lot of times, myself, even Kim would also share. And a lot of times our students of color will arrive to college campuses already academically traumatized, right? You know what I mean? That they have been shared narratives, educational narratives about who they are and what they will become. And so already from that perspective, they're already coming into college with a deficit, right? That they're struggling. Like even that terminology when people say, oh, let's work with the at-risk youth, right? We're already labeling them as at risk, right? And so we wanted to change the narrative, like from at risk to at promise, right? Because now you're saying to them that you're in this place in education where you're going to succeed. And we're, as an institution, is going to provide the conditions in the environment that's going to allow you to succeed, right? We're shifting away from this idea of it's the student fault. You're not studying hard enough, right? To the part of, no, it's the institutional responsibility to create these experiences so they can succeed. And so part of that is really renaming and programming in their minds that they are somebody and they are something. And so legacy was the word that we wanted to define, because legacy is the imprints that they're going to find and redefine. They're going to begin to show that their narratives and their stories matter, so that the people behind them, whether it be their little brothers, little sister, little cousins, we want to create a lineage, where they can then disrupt the cycle that says, no, you cannot succeed, right? Because imagine, right, for me, the CIPHER is beautiful because when we do our CIPHER graduation, one of the highlights I always love about the graduation is seeing my CIPHER students graduate, but then also seeing their younger siblings, seeing them graduate. There's something very powerful to show to young brothers and young sisters to say their big brother or big sister made it, despite the messages, despite the experiences, despite the people that say they cannot, right? They are legacy. And so when students hear that, although they may not believe it right away off the get-go, over the course of their time with the CIPHER, they begin to learn about their power. They learn about their story. And then they begin to understand like, oh man, I can do this. And I don't know if Kim Davalos had shared this in her interview, but in our conversations around like the legacy of students, what is it that we want our students to get out of the CIPHER? And this is coined by Kim Davalos, and she said swag. We want our students to have swag. And so the reason why we say swag, we're so Filipino because we love our acronyms.
I was waiting for it.
The Filipinos love their I'm drinking some tea. What's an acronym for tea? Truth.
Entertainment and action.
Hey,
that's what we're doing here, man. You gotta keep people engaged.
Yes.
But give that truth.
Yes.
To impart change on their community through action, fam.
Dude, this is how it's done, y'all. This is creativity in the moment. This is freestyle, yo. We just heard it live with Kuya Chris, man. He just did that in seconds. In seconds. So when people across the nation, and when I say across the nation, we've done several conferences, workshops. We took our CIPHER work all over the place, and people say, well, how do you know it works? It's like, what is it? What is working? What makes CIPHER different than a lot of educational systems and processes and practices? And I always say swag. We have students have swag, and they especially white folks, they'd be like, oh, swag? What's swag? You know what I mean? They look at us all crazy. What does that mean? And so really swag is like, the acronym, the swag is that after completing their CIPHER experience, we want them to have a stronger sense of self and identity. 2, we want them to have the stronger sense of their why, purpose. A, We want to be able to have a stronger sense of agency and advocacy, to be able to be acquire and equip the skills to advocate themselves in systems of oppression, right? And then G, how might we leverage this idea of grit and sustainability and self-care, right? You know what I mean? And when people ask us, how do you know CIPHER works? Well, my students have swag. Because now they take ownership of who they are, where they come from. They don't necessarily now see their struggles as weaknesses. They see struggles as their greatest teachers, things that they can learn on and impart wisdom and knowledge to their younger siblings or their community, right? And so when we do swag in our classrooms or in counseling, we're very specific. But this is what makes CIPHER so unique, is that every teacher that is part of our CIPHER, shout out to Janice Sapigao, shout out to Sol McCarthy, shout out to, the Rodfather, Rod McBall, right? Like, it's very important that in all of their classes, whether it's history, whether it's English, whether it's business, whether it's counseling, that you have to integrate experiences and activities that leverage swag. So how might our classroom look like when we hear stories about our own identities and our own experiences? How will you begin to engage conversation and dialogue in your history class about their purpose and their why? How might they look in their business class and learn about skills around advocacy and agency, right? Because a lot of entrepreneurs, right, you got to learn how to hustle and get yours, right? And then through all these different classes, whether it's English and math or sciences or history, how might we be overcoming that with our own grit, our own resiliency, and practice self-care, right? And so for us, that is the key to the success, I believe, for CIPHER hip hop learning community, is that swag piece, right? So it's this duality of layers. Because see, here's the thing: what's problematic in hip hop education, often when people think about hip hop education, is that it's like, oh, well, you play rap songs and that's what you do, right? Or you play music. It's relegated to this very simple formula of just playing music or analyzing lyrics. It's much more deeper than that, right? You know what I mean? Because if it's relegated to that, then anybody could do it, right? Anybody could culturally appropriate the hip hop culture and say, well, I'm a teacher and I play rap music, so does that make me hip hop ed? And so for us, it's much more deeper than that, which is why like swag is so important, because it really taps into the soul of what hip hop is truly about, right? And people have to understand that when hip hop was born in the early 70s, right, it was born because it was a way for the youth to express frustrations during the time where the social, economic, and political climate was very traumatizing, right? The conditions were so bad that kids during that era had to figure out how to navigate that. And hip hop was sort of like the phoenix that kind of rose from those ashes, like hip hop culture created from that thing. So from their conditions. So in the same way we look at educational systems, we can't relegate hip hop ed to just a song. We have to begin to dive deep in terms of what is it about hip hop that really taps into the soul and the identity of our students. Because if you're talking about like, well, does hip hop work? Well, what are they doing? Because theory without action is bullshit, right? You feel me? You can learn, you know what I mean? You could learn about your history and your culture, but what you going to do? It doesn't impart change. Doesn't impart action. So swag, hip hop ed is about what you learn in the classroom, and in what ways could you then impart that into action and change. And so CIPHER has a social justice element. It's huge, has a social justice element to it. You know what I mean? So a lot of our projects, our activities, our midterms are centered around how do we create change, not only our communities, but like the more globally, but also individually and within your families. So it's about like lifting up, right? And so for me to have to explain that or have to navigate those kind of conversations could be frustrating, but it's necessary. Because if I don't say it, then everybody's going to have the assumption that hip hop education in classrooms and counseling spaces are just simple rap songs, right? Let's do a dance move or something.
Oh, there's a windmill. That's hip hop ed, fam.
Yeah. Let's drop a head spin right now.
Do you used to break when you in high school?
I did,
like
man.
That?
I did. I did.
Yeah.
And I was part of a crew. We're called the Sub-City Rockers, Subterranean Rockers. I was the guy that my specialty move was the crab. Right. So I used to do this, I would top rock, drop down to a 6-step, and then get engaged into my crab. Then what I do the hydraulic crab to the one hand crab and then to a freeze. Right. That's when I was like 50 pounds. Right. Nowadays, I can't do that. I might break my wrist. But yeah. That was my go-to moves. But, I probably won 1 or 2 battles in my lifetime. And, sometimes you get to that point where you're like, okay, you're good at certain things, you're okay in certain things, you're not so good on certain things. But it was cool to dabble in all the different elements. But writing was sort of like my thing.
Because in this piece, you actually talk about going into a lot of rap battles.
Yeah.
You did a lot of rap battles during that time?
Yeah.
Was it the format as is now in terms of no beat, or is it rap battle over a beat?
Rap battle over a beat. Over a beat. Back in the day, I mean, when I hear rap battles today with no beat, it's cool, but it was very foreign to me. I'm like, really? They're freestyling or battling with no beat? Because that's not what I grew up on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I grew up on, like, let's throw a beat and let's just rap to it. You know what I'm saying?
And then during that time, were the raps pre-written, or was it a freestyle rap battle?
Yeah, I mean, most of it I would say was freestyle, but you could tell if someone wrote something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so sometimes we would throw things like, okay, so if this is a freestyle battle, let's freestyle battle with only with the items that's on this table. You know what I mean? So you know that they're not coming with the writtens. And when they come with the writtens, everybody starts booing because they know. It's like,
Interesting.
You got called out. So you never want to get called out in a rap battle.
Interesting.
Never.
Interesting to see how it's changed, because now it's rap battles, no beat, but then majority writtens.
Yes.
It's all writtens. And I gotta give, there's intricate setups and rhyme schemes, and they go deep with some of it, right?
Yes.
But it's also just different from like the past, over the beat and freestyling, more so versus written. So it's interesting to see the evolution.
It is. And I want to say one thing about that is that I think that's what happens when capitalism takes over hip hop, right? Because, if you're doing a freestyle battle and you're recording it for a show or a podcast or something, you run the risk of having more whack rappers than good rappers.
Oh, when you have a freestyle.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And nobody want to listen to whack rap unless you do invite only, right? So you invite knowing that these guys are great with freestyles. But if you're doing an open battle, you know what I'm saying, you run the risk of like losing viewers, sponsors. So very important. So when you think about rap battles, people want to hear the punchlines. People want to hear the rhyme schemes. People want to hear the intonations, the cadence and everything. Nobody wants to just hear anything whack, right? You know what I'm saying? So how we do that, how do we control the environment, which then controls the cash flow to ensure that this show exists? Does that make sense?
So was it like open call rap battle before? Like
yeah.
Like, all right, we're gonna have a rap battle. All the rappers come up like that.
Like that, man. Like that. If you're in the neighborhood, if you're in the street corner, if you're at a family party's always big with rap battles.
Really?
Yeah, in the garage. You know what I mean? Or house parties was big. Yeah. Oh man.
During your time, were you around a lot of Filipinos? Were there a lot of Filipino other rap battlers like this? In the Antioch area, is that where you would be kicking it?
Yeah, Antioch, Pittsburgh, Vallejo, Hercules, Richmond. Look, most of my rap experience happened in Vallejo, right? And there's the reason being is because I spent a lot of summers in Vallejo with my cousins live out in Vallejo, and he's the one who they were the ones who exposed me to Vallejo rap. You know what I mean? Like I was like, oh snaps! Like Mac Ma at one point was one of my favorite rappers, from Vallejo, right? And so we all loved it so much that we created a crew. Like we was part of this crew. Initially, we called ourselves the Hood Rats because in our first show, we had all these Russell hoodies, And again, no plan. It's like, who y'all? Like, let's write something now. The Hood Rats. Yeah, the Hood Rats. Like, oh, shoot. Like, we call ourselves the Hood Rats for, you know, and then since then we call ourselves Lyrical Assassins after that. Right. And now Lyrical Assassins, since I've left the group from my family, they're now XL, which is still a crew right now. So XL is a hip hop Filipino group that consists of my 2 cousins and my little brother. So it's 3 of them. And so, yeah, you need to get them on. They's tight.
They're based out of Vallejo?
They're Vallejo. My brother lives here in Daly City, just around the corner. And then the 2 of them are in Vallejo, American Canyon. But yeah, I you know, it's that's where my rap game starting to sharpen up a little bit is in Vallejo. And then we started doing school battles, right? Because that was big at the time, like high school assemblies. It was a big thing when you're in high school. Imagine I'm in Anak High School. I have to cut class because I got to go to Hogan High or Vallejo High School for assembly battle.
Really?
You know what I mean?
They had assembly battles,
right? You know what I mean?
Schools?
Right, in the high school. So imagine that. So imagine you're with your friends. They're walking to English class in high school, and I'm about to skip 5th, 6th, and 7th period because I got to go find my way to Vallejo. I mean, that's instant credibility. Like, I was like an instant, like, celebrity. Like, oh, Nate's about to cut the last 3 classes of high school to go to Vallejo High School to go rap battle. It's a trip, man. Those are the good days, man. And then also just doing some rap battles on KMEL. You know, at the time, and that's the other piece in my book of rhymes. I wanted to show you my written rhymes for 106.1 KMEL. So back in the day, they used to have this show called 10 O'Clock The Bomb. Right. And essentially you get on the phone, right? You wait for your turn and then they'll play a beat and then you would rap and you would be on air live. You know what I'm saying? And so so basically I'm rapping and the beat that they always use, because it's always the same beat. So we always prepare ourselves, was remember the Functified, the Brat? The Brat Functified, and it was the Between the Sheets instrumental. When you hear it, you'd be like, oh, I know that, right? But that was the beat that they always play. And I remember getting on and just rapping, make it to day 2. I win, make it to day 3. What's going on?
Oh, they'll call you back?
Yeah, they'll call you back. So if you win, you go call again at 10 o'clock. It's your turn to rhyme. And you only get 5 days to make it to the Hall of Fame. I lost in day 4. But you know what I mean? It was a good time where, you know, for me, was able to kind of share, like, just share myself, share who I am, share where I'm from. Right? That's a cool thing about hip hop too, right? Amongst all the different musical genres is this idea of a location and space. You know what I mean? I mean, I could be mistaken, but I feel like hip hop prominently is one of the most prominent musical genre that really talks about space and place, right? You know, a person like Nas talks about Queensbridge all the time, and you know where he's from. You know, E40 talks about Vallejo. You know, Too Short talks about Oakland, right? I don't know if rock does that or jazz or pop songs ever say anything about where they're from, but I think there's something very powerful with that hip hop allows a place, allows a mechanism, a process for us to share who we are and what we become and where we're from, which is why I think it's so profound when you're talking about hip hop ed. You know what I mean?
Actually, great transition to hip hop ed, because I wanted to ask a question. Do you feel that you're code switching when you're in academia a lot, like in terms of the traditional perspective of hip hop from an academic lens? At least before, it was very dismissive and very, you were saying, controlled by media powers that want to paint a certain picture of how hip hop is, right? And even goes down into what your own father thought, right? Of like, what are you going to do with hip hop, right? But now you're in this process of legitimizing and contributing to the legitimization of hip hop in education and in academia. How has that process been? Because even I think you mentioned in this short article in Empire of Funk that when you first gave your idea of a thesis, there was a pushback from like, how are you gonna do hip hop in education, right? So could you speak on that, like what the process has been to kind of fight for space for hip hop in education?
Yeah. Whew. It was a process. It wasn't something that was like, night and day. It took, I would say, years of really navigating the system. Hip hop, one of the hip hop sensibilities is this notion around show and prove, right? And unfortunately, hip hop is sort of like placed in that box where to understand the power and the impact of hip hop, show us first and prove it, then we can have this conversation, right? Because, the state of education is so thick, right? The way it's structured, the way the policies and practices that oppress many communities of color, it's so thick, right? It's not one thing that can really dismantle those structures. And with hip hop for me is one of the ways in which we can introduce that and say, hey, we're not trying to replace educational systems, although that is the end goal, right? In this ideal place. But if we can provide an alternative so students feel like they can be a part of their experience, then let's introduce that hip hop. And so hip hop for me, it was a struggle because I had to have to explain what it means, right? Because then you run the risk of folks who are uneducated about hip hop culture. And when I say folks, I'm talking about educators, administrators, faculty, staff, who sees your work and just like not understanding it. If you don't educate them, if you focus all of your energies fighting them about the legitimacy of hip hop, while it is a fight to be fought, it could be very tiring. And so the answer to battling these educators is education. And so by doing that, by educating them through the lens of higher education. So for example, I need to talk their language in a way. I have to talk their language so then they begin to talk my language. So for example, let me think of an example. Let's say orientation to college, right? It's a part of a process in college that's required for all students, right? For me to interject and integrate hip hop and orientation, I may not say hip hop explicitly, but I might say something that's culturally responsive, artistic, innovative. When I get the buy-in from an administration, then I say, well, because you accepted this idea, this concept around orientation rooted in culturally responsive pedagogy, what you're really saying yes to is hip hop. And they're like, well, really? How? Why? And then I begin to explain how hip hop is culturally responsive. And then they get it, right? And that's when you begin to say, okay, now I'm building allies and advocates. Because a lot of times, and this is how strong media is, right? Media paints a picture of what hip hop is supposed to look like and what they want America and the world to look at, which makes our job a little bit more difficult, but much more rewarding when you begin to shape and inform hip hop practices from the lens of higher ed. And so when you talk their language, unfortunately, we have to end the conversation with their language. But for me, what's the most important is that do we exit the conversation speaking our language, right? Does that make sense? Right? Because sometimes people will say, oh man, Nate, like why you got to speak their language just to introduce your concept? Well, that's true. There is some tensions and I get it and I feel it. But if I don't get them to understand our work and the importance of our work, and we're constantly fighting and they're pushing back, fighting and pushing back, sooner or later, I'm going to get tired. You know what I mean? Unless someone has another solution as to how we approach these kind of conversations around code switching and being able to use hip hop in these levels of education, then please show me. But we're now fortunate because Rock the School Bells has been around for almost more than a decade, that has been in multiple colleges, and now CIPHER is embedded in Skyline. That's hip hop is common language on that campus. They know that hip hop is positive. They know hip hop is impactful. So there's no one questioning. It's always interesting that, when we have new folks coming in, every year there's new folks coming into the college, faculty and staff. And then when they first hear that there's a hip hop program, really, the college that I came from never had that before. They would never think about doing that at all, right? And again, it's another place for education, right? And so I always revert back to really just being able to provide context, provide an avenue where we can both understand a common problem, right? So if we're talking about a common problem is low graduation rates for our men of color, well, how might hip hop pedagogy help inform practices so we can help our students of color? They can be on board with that then. Because why? Because we're both trying to solve the same issue, right? You know what I mean? So like being able to reframe that and being able to show like, because we're uplifting and acknowledging our men of color story and theirs through rap or through art, through murals, through beat making, we are now allowing them a space to feel like they're a part of this institution or part of this campus community. Can you rock with that? And administrators is like, yes, we can. You know what I mean? So, so this idea of code switching went from now, I explicitly see now hip hop pedagogy, and I'm unapologetic about it now. So when I go to different community college, like this past September, I was invited to do a lead in all day training to community college counselors at Ohlone College in Fremont, right? And I introduced them to critical hip hop pedagogy and how it informs our counseling practice. They brought me on figuring like, man, our counseling practices, we need some help. We need to be more culturally relevant and responsive. Our graduation rates are low. Our students of color are struggling. Like, yo, we need some help. And so, you know, I came there to kind of provide them with a perspective, an alternative, a way of being and a way of doing. And so, you know, when I introduced hip hop, I was very upfront about this. This is hip hop. Let me share you about hip hop, the culture, and how it translates the way we work and work with students, right? Because hip hop is about relationships, right? When you develop a authentic and genuine relationship with the people you serve and the people you want to help, they're more than likely to want to help you or want to rock with you, right? And I was telling a lot of folks of color in the room, it's like, yo, there are a lot of folks, students of color that are aching and they're hurting and they're agonizing and they need you to be there with them. And it's not so much about regurgitating information like graduation requirements, transfer requirements. While all that is important, they want to know that they matter. They want to know that they belong and that there's a sense of belonging, like that their stories matter. And so when I introduce hip hop in these educational spaces, I don't code switch, man. Like when I was at Ohlone, I was rocking a hoodie, some Jordans, right? Nothing that you really can't, you know, and mind you, I'll dress it up in certain conferences here and there, right? But every once in a while, I'll floss it up.
I mean, you got that swag, bro. When I was at Skyline College, you be rocking it, bro. and some clean ass fits, man.
Yeah.
Not gonna lie, you got that swag,
hey,
right?
swag.
I'm bringing full circle.
Yo, what's the acronym for swag?
Self, right? Why? The advocacy.
Yeah, advocacy.
And grit.
I
like that.
Bro.
I'm going to print
shout
that.
out to Kim Davalos on that.
Shout out. What is that influencing now what your doctorate program is, your thesis, and what you're writing about that? Could you share a little bit? Because congrats, it's about to be done in May.
Yeah,
coming up that you're going to have your doctorate.
Yes. Oh man, May's coming soon. So for the last 2.5 years, it's a 3-year program. I've been really looking at looking the ways in which we serve our students of color. So I'm drawing from my experiences with Rock the School Bells and CIPHER Hip Hop Learning Community. And so I really want to put hip hop pedagogy out in the forefront in college counseling. There is no research out there. This is the first of its kind when we're talking about how hip hop pedagogy informs our counseling practices. And so while that is a very exciting path to be on, it's also scary. It's also frustrating because you're like the first, right? You really don't know what, there's, little research here. So you're really paving the path. And so, but the way I really want to look at my dissertation is not so much the end result, but also it's just a continued conversation, a dialogue. My hopes is that someone who picks up this dissertation will be able to say, I'm going to take this and I'll take it to the next level, and that's what it's supposed to be about, right? And so my research is studying 4 California community college counselors in the Bay, in California, that are practicing hip hop pedagogy in their counseling profession. And so I had the opportunity to interview all 4. All of them have very phenomenal and amazing stories, and it really talks about, how was it like for them to grow up? How did they fall in love with hip hop, right? What was their hip hop experience like? And then how did their hip hop experience inform their counseling practice, right? You know what I mean? And so what I'm beginning to see is several themes that are starting to pop up, that's very common amongst all 4. Right. And one being that very interesting enough, one is about space. Right. When we think about muralism and graffiti, when you look at a white wall, like there's really no story other than it's just a white wall. Right. But when you see a mural or when you see a graffiti with a message on it, that conjures up conversation and dialogue about what is going on this picture, the textures, the colors, the angles, the messages, right? And so when I say that, when we talk about counseling in its most traditional way, it's very prescriptive. Chris, you have a problem, I have a solution. Here's your solution, and off you go. Right? Very prescribed. But what we're arguing with hip hop right now is culturally responsive. I want you to tell me your story. I want you to let me know how this educational experience will look like. Let's co-construct this experience. And that's what hip hop's about. But part of that co-construction and co-creating the space is that my space, my counseling office, has to reflect the communities of color. Right? So traditional counseling, if you go to traditional counseling, you barely see people of color on walls. You rarely see books that represents them, right? And so I'm very conscious about how my office looks like. Right. So when you ever go to my office, I mean, there's artwork, and all the artworks are created by my students. There's musical instruments. There's posters that represents hip hop culture and also Filipino culture. So when a student walks into my space, right, even before I even utter a word, Chris, counseling begins. It's nonverbal. Why? Because they're looking around like, yo, so you listen to Chance the Rapper? And I know this is the first time I'm meeting this student. Yeah, I listen to Chance the Rapper. What's your favorite song? And from there, the connection has already been established, right? So when you take the concept of graffiti, people look at graffiti or aerosol writing as this very bad thing. This is one of the ways in which we can inspire and inform counseling through the lens of graffiti and say, if we do our space up, we can have conversations that's going to be rich and deep and have breadth, right? You know what I mean? Because if I'm coming into a counseling office and it's all white walls and it's just you, then I'm left to you to lead this conversation. The student can't lead the conversation. They're like, okay, so I don't know why I'm here. You know what I mean? So this study that I'm doing with these 4 California community college counselors, have shared with me all of their different practices, what inspired them. But that one theme that came up was space, the use of space. Right. And so right now I'm still in the process of getting more themes, but that's one of the more prominent themes that came up.
I have a question. How would hip hop pedagogy, for maybe in the lens of a counselor, right? What if be helpful? What if the student is not into hip hop? Is there still applications, and how can you approach that, and what lessons can you get from that to apply to connecting with a student who's not necessarily into that genre or lifestyle of hip hop?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's a very common question that I get, right? Does hip hop appeal to all students? No, right? But what can you gather from this space, whether it's hip hop or not? What can you gather from this space? There's going to be something that they might get attracted to. I had a student that's not into hip hop, but he made a comment that said, "Man, I like your room. It's different." You know, and I would say, "Well, what's different about it?" And it's like, well, you have all these posters. It's like, okay, for someone like you who goes into a space to see all these pictures and posters, what does this feel like, you know, being in space? And they would say, yo, it's a cool space. I like it. You know what I mean? So, you know, there's a way to reach out students in different ways, even if they don't listen to hip hop. And so the other layer to it is this, and this is something that I've been working on and kind of refining and drafting right now as we speak. So thank you for allowing me to kind of like process this out loud. Is that hip hop, when you strip down hip hop, the 4 elements of hip hop, b-boying, graffiti, MCing, DJing, right? When you strip what I call the actual physical pieces of it, so breakdancing, the art of dance, mural, the spray cans, DJing, the turntables, MC, the microphone. When you strip that all down, what you're really getting is MCing is really storytelling. Graffiti, it's about the space, right? How space can impact oneself. When you think about DJ and turntablism, you think about energy, right? And what I mean by that, by energy, is that anytime you see a DJ, a good DJ knows when to keep the dance floor full. But when the dance floor kind of empties out, that energy dissipates. Any good DJ will be then like, I got to get them back onto the DJ. So as a counselor, you have to be able to be attuned with the nonverbals and the behavior, just like a DJ does. Right. And so it's all about communications, both verbally and non-verbally. And then with breakdancing, this idea of collaboration, right? You know what I mean? So what I mean by collaboration is that when you think about the B-boy crews, not everyone does the top rock. Not everyone does the power moves, right? Individually, they may be good at one thing or a set of things, but as a crew, they're phenomenal. You know what I mean? And so when I make that connection to community, when you're talking about breakdancing, I let my students know that while I'm your counselor, we have a community of folks here at Skyline College, just like a B-boy crew or B-girl crew, that's going to support you in that, right? And so when you strip just the physicality of the elements and go at the root of it, then you're working with storytelling, you work with energy, you're working with the value of space, and then community. Now you're looking at 4 elements of not hip hop, but the 4 elements of hip hop ed. You know what I mean? And then when I go deeper, see, we going deep on this one, bro.
Go deep, fam.
So, you know, people would say, well, I always feel like, you know, with comics or superhero stories, there's always origins, right? There's the origin story, right? It you know, hip hop culture, when they say it was born in August in 1973, like hip hop didn't just pop out of nowhere, right? Like MCing is a byproduct of the Black African American experience, right? They're all about their oral storytelling. They've been MCing for years, right? The mural doesn't just exist. The graffiti doesn't exist at 1973. Graffiti existed prior to hip hop, all the way back to hieroglyphic days when the Egyptians, right, wrote on walls. When you think about DJ and turntablism, DJs didn't just pop up out of nowhere. People were playing music, you know, playing instruments, because the turntable is like an instrument, right? So you're playing instruments, and that dates back. And then when you think about breakdancing, right, that's evolved from so many different dance styles from Africa, West Africa, Brazil, right? So there's origin stories of all these hip hop elements. What I'm trying to say is this: hip hop is indigenous. When you think about the Filipinos, when you think about the Native Americans, when you think about the Pacific Islanders, when you think about the Alaskan Indians, when you think about all of these indigenous folks all throughout the many years prior to hip hop, they all have the 4 elements, right? There's storytelling in Filipino culture. There's dance in Filipino culture. There's instrumentation in Filipino culture. There's art, right? Our language, the way we write, right? In script, that is art. So when you think about hip hop culture, it's no secret why so many people globally and worldwide is attracted to this culture of hip hop, because it's indigenous to the DNA, It's in their DNA. So for me as a Filipino American who loves hip hop, now learning about his Filipino history at San Francisco State, now I'm making this connection. It's like, damn, hip hop is, there's this connection to Filipino culture in hip hop, right? You know, when I talking to Punahele in Hawaii, right? He talks about the 4 elements of hip hop through the lens of Hawaiian history. You know, the chanting, the hula, the dance, right? The hieroglyphics, the way they write, you know, it's all indigenous. They have 4 elements. When you think about the Native Americans, they have the 4 elements. So I started doing this research and I'm like, oh, snaps. I was like, yo, this doesn't begin in 1973. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not taking the credit away from Black culture, because they are the ones that really brought it to the forefront. What I'm saying is that there are some spiritual connections, some cultural connections that really connects hip hop to many of communities of color, right? You know what I'm saying? And so like now when you go fast forward to today, when you talk about hip hop education, when people say, well, does hip hop work? Is hip hop culture responsive? Is it culture relevant? Then I say yes, for those various reasons, right? You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, snaps. And now you want to add hip hop elements like fashion? Well, then we can do fashion. Look up any culture, any ethnicity, they'll have their own fashion, the way they dress, right? And so hip hop culture is so phenomenal. It's widespread. It's something that I feel like can connect to so many people all around the world. It's universal. When people say hip hop universal, it truly is universal.
That's why I think it's so dope sometimes when I hear raps in another language and then it bangs, it slaps, and then I don't understand anything, but you could feel the honesty, the truth, and the power behind it, the storytelling behind it. Right?
Yes.
And it sounds like, from what you're explaining in terms of knowing the history and putting it into academia, you're legitimizing this cultural knowledge and wisdom that has been ostracized because of outside media or influences, while actually bringing it back into our world within academia. At least it's acknowledging that this is what some people say, right? An indigenous form of music, indigenous to America, right? This is a truly American art form and genre versus others which may have other roots in different places. But this really is from America and from this soil and from the people here, right? And that's why there's that connection to, or people can grasp onto it because of its authenticity. Right? Just as you were saying, other indigenous groups have those 4 elements. This is here from America, and it's a lot more raw in terms of versus, for example, maybe American rock, which comes from the blues and soul, from this and that. There's a lot of you're closer to the source. In a way, maybe. That's why that hip hop has that. But it was ostracized because of other reasons, and now is being brought back into legitimate space, quote unquote, right? You're legitimizing it. Wow. I mean, that's problematic too, because it's legitimate already, but right, you're just kind of introducing it to places where it's been pushed out of.
Absolutely.
How does it feel now? Because I want your reaction now that you're 5 years into CIPHER. Is it the 5th year now? 5th, 6th year?
6th. We're going into 6th.
Going into 6th year. You're already 10 years, 15 years for Rock the School Bell?
We will be on our 13th year.
13th year. How does it feel to be arguably innovators in something that's a legacy? Right? Like, even me, I'm just thinking, I was like, oh shit, what will, it's like you have a kid that's already like 13 years old. Right. Another one that's like 6. Right. How old is your actual kid?
4.
Okay, so you have 3 kids already. How does it feel, and how do you look at these things? Because sometimes, I know you mentioned, like, sometimes you might have to let it go, or let the next generation of youth take it up and be the leaders there, right? What's your relationship right now with these projects?
Well, currently with CIPHER, I'm the coordinator for CIPHER. And so, I'm still attached to that in many ways, right? Doing the programming, ensuring that the program is sustaining. Rock the School Bells. Big shout out to Kim for holding it down for the last 2 years, right? While I was in, doing my doctoral work. I've since taken back this year's Rock the School Bells 13, and just trying to create a model where it becomes more than just me organizing it, right? And so, it's going to give me a time now that after I'm graduated from school to really think through, like, what does Rock the School Bells look like in the future? You know what I mean? One of the things that we're going to be doing something different with Rock the School Bells this year is that we're going to have, so we'll have our traditional youth conference, right? Which is always a huge success for a lot of our feeder high schools and middle schools, is that we're also dedicating a day, which we've dubbed like the Rock the School Bells Community Jam, which is essentially just a day where the community gets together. We're offering, like we have a dance battle, we'll have MC battles, we'll have vendors, community's going to come out. Like just as all ages, all families come into this place, right? And the reason why this is important to me and for the community is that there's nothing like that right now in this area, right? You know what I mean? When you think about community jams, big ups to like Polsky, who's doing some major work out in the East Bay when he's doing Mighty 4 Day, like really bringing the community together, through the spirit of hip hop and honoring the different elements of hip hop, but while also engaging the community at the same time. Like that's something that we definitely want to have here in the Daly City, San Bruno, South City area. Because when I talk to my students in CIPHER, right, they're like, oh, cool, man, we just got done with all of our classes. I want to engage in these kind of programming after schools. Where can I make beats, or where can I hone in my mic skills, or how can I learn how to DJ and turntable, right? When I think about like all of these different programs, are there any programs out there in this area? And I couldn't find one, right? We do have School of Martial Arts and Hip Hop by my man Joel and DJ Bite Size and DJ Don, who's out there in South City running a DJ turntablism class, right? But outside of that, in this area, really nothing, right? Unless you go to San Francisco or Oakland, right? So there's this need for creativity and innovation where while we have hip hop education on campus, what does it look like in the community, right? And so Rock the School Bells, a community jam, is important because we want to be able to showcase the 4 elements of hip hop, bring the community together, bring our youth together to meet other folks that are doing this type of work, and perhaps maybe leverage this energy and harnessing this energy to create a space so that we can build a space in Daly City, right? That can house this type of programming for the community. Can you imagine a center, a cultural center where students can go and make beats and take dance practices or hone in their skills in mics, right? You know what I mean? That they can be part of this community space, right? I think that's important, right? People got their ballet schools, people got their piano schools. I mean, shoot, like hip hop is huge. People really strive and really are attracted and appeal to hip hop. And so why not create a space for that, for our community? So I think this community jam, this Rock the School Bells community jam, this all day event is a way for our community to kind of see the power and the beauty of what hip hop looks like. You know what I mean? To be able to celebrate our youth voices because they're going to be performing, right? It's a day of celebration. And I want to be able to say Daly City is doing something big in the Bay Area. You know what I mean? It's like, it's bigger than Rock the School Bells now. It's about our community now.
Hey, in a year, we'll see. Stay tuned for the announcement.
Hey, that's right. That's what's up. That's what's up.
Cool. Let me just take a little break. I have to use the restroom, but I got a few questions I want to get to. Dope! Awesome!
You're going to be a part of my dissertation for sure.
I am honored.
Yes.
That would be so dope.
Yes.
You're legitimizing the Filipino garage, man.
Yes. Can I use your real name?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure.
Some people be like, can you use an alias? But you want that.
You know what I was thinking during this little break was just how awesome it is to have someone in such a depth of understanding, or just talking to someone that you are invested in hip hop in hip hop pedagogy, and have gone deep in it, and constantly circling ideas around, deconstructing, reconstructing these ideas and concepts, right? Because even if I can engage in these topics and it interests me, and I'm on the surface level, right? And then through this conversation, I'm able to dive a little deeper and see what else is in there, what the structure behind it looks like, what is trying to impart on other people, and what change is trying to affect, right?
Yes.
Because I gotta say, when I saw CIPHER pop up, right, I was like, damn it, I'm about to leave Skyline. I was like, I would have loved this, right? I would have loved to have like a joint KLC, take all the KLC and CIPHER classes, man.
Yes.
That would have been next level for me, bro. So, but that's why I appreciate the work being done, and I love it. Right? Shout out! I got one of the Rock the School Bell scholarships years back.
Yes, you did.
And I got the necklace right there.
Booyah!
I got it,
up.
and it's definitely a legacy that's really being built, right? But I want to ask a few things. I actually asked the homie who knows you.
Oh,
and
snap.
I was like, "Hey, you got any questions for Nate Diggs that he wants to know?" And I was like, "Oh, this is a good kind of question that because we've talked about your work and hip hop pedagogy, right? But I want to kind of zoom back away from the theory, right, and go into the person behind the work being done, right? Because throughout this conversation, you've shared about the ups and downs, the struggles and stuff, right?
Yeah.
You shared a little bit about the stability that you have because of the support systems, and how you're very intentional about who you surround yourself with, right? I want to ask, do you have a spiritual practice? Do you like? Is that a religion or spirituality something in your life? And the homie asked, what are your views on spirituality? How do you approach that? Right? What are your practices and norms in that way?
Yeah. Let me preface by saying that I think I had the double layer of the Filipino experience, right? My pop's in the military, right? That's one layer. And then my parents are highly religious. So we talking about strict on strict. You know what I mean? And I preface that because, religion, Catholicism has always been part of my family for a very long time. Just my mom's super religious. But it also had a very interesting impact on me, because as a result of this idea of, structure in the military, and then religion in terms of like how do you present yourself, or how do you go about life in general, and how do you treat people, right? And so it had a very strange effect on me, right? Strange in that I wasn't quite sure that's the religion that I can really connect with and be part of, because there were so many, there were so many contradictions that I was beginning to discover as I was getting older. But I also respected my mom so much, and I love her so much, that I didn't want to bring that into the conversation. And so how I dealt with the tension between the two is that I began to engage in very self-reflective practices, mainly through meditation, right? And so, I don't know if that's a spiritual form, but in many ways, it's not that I'm praying to somebody or I'm lifting myself to a higher being, but recognizing that I don't know, there's a spiritual sense that if I engage in self-reflection and be one with myself, that I can find inner peace and harmony, right? And so I've been practicing that for about 3 years, and that's through the forms of like guided meditation, being able to step away from the the pieces of life that's very that can be very toxic, because we live in a world that's like inundated with so much information and so much content that it could have such a negative impact on who you become. Like, for example, if someone said to you, like, yo, Chris, I'm gonna walk away from social media and for a month, I'm gonna cut my social media. That person comes back to you and has a deeper sense of understanding and perspective because they took themselves away from this notion of content and inundation and information. So I see the same thing with spirituality, is that the ability to discipline yourself in a way that you separate yourself from what's happening in the world and finding your inner self, right? And this is something that I've been doing as a result of being in this program, this doctoral program, because it's taking so much away from me in terms of family time, me time, that you oftentimes might lose yourself in the process. You might engage in not the best self-care practices, like no sleep or drinking too much coffee or something like that. But being able to spend 10 to 15 minutes with yourself in pure silence or through guided meditation, I feel like you're lifting yourself to something or someone or some being or something. But I know the result of it is that I'm at more peace and I find more harmony.
So do you try to do it every day?
Every day. I mean, there's not a specific time during the day, but I'll do once a day.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That's a really good consistency now that you've been doing 3 years.
3 years. And especially during the writing process, right? So my process of writing, mind you, I got to write maybe per day, maybe 6 to 8 pages per day. That's a lot of writing, right? But for me to get to that point, my process is I take 15 minutes to reflect, to meditate. I close my eyes, dark room, position myself, play music that's going to help engage in my thoughts, right? And what I do is I imagine me writing. I imagine the words on the paper. I imagine how it flows. I imagine the topics that are being shared. I imagine the titles. I'm imagining all of this because when I wake up or open my eyes after that 15 minutes, I'm ready. Because when I don't do that, Chris, I get rattled, I get anxious, I get stressed, I get mental blocks, I get writer's block. I'm like, I don't know what to write because I didn't give myself the opportunity to recenter myself, right? You can't, I personally can't write without being harmonious, without feeling some level of peace, right? I think that spirituality has allowed me to sustain and survive these 3 years of like constant educational stimulation. Because I don't know what you know, but I go to class every other weekend, 8 hours a day. So imagine if you're working 5 days a week, Monday through Friday. Then you got to go to school Saturday, Sunday for 8 hours a day. And then guess what? Monday you go back to work. So you really don't have a break. So the time that I write is usually in the evenings. And so for me, like spirituality and meditation and self-reflection has been such a practice that's just made me really made myself free and at peace and one with myself.
To kind of rewind a little bit, because I don't think I asked, why did you decide to go into a doctoral program? You were doing a lot of work already. The things launched, CIPHER and the Rock School Bells was going while you were working. And what was the impetus and the push towards a doctoral program?
Yeah, man. Very good story. And it's the pivot. It was another pivot in my life. In 1999, when I graduated my bachelor's degree in psychology, and even going back further, all my life, my pops would always say, you got to be a doctor. You got to be a doctor. You got to be a doctor. So when I graduated with my psychology degree in 1999, he gives me this card. I still have this card to this day. Congratulations, you graduated. But on the front of that envelope, he writes, Dr. Nate Nevado. This is 1999, right? Like literally 20 years ago. And, I was like, this dude don't stop, man. This dude don't stop, And so engaging in this work at Skyline, you know, people used to always say, particularly with Rock the School Bells and CIPHER, they're like, yo, Nate, did you know you're doing your dissertation? And it never occurred to me that I was. You know what I mean? I'm just doing the work because I love it. It's important. It's valuable. I see the impact it has on students. And so, you know, once you start to hear this more and more and more, you begin to start to think like, okay, maybe I should. Maybe I can do this thing. I'm telling you, it was never in my cards. I never, ever, ever thought I was going to go back to school, right? I graduated with my master's degree in 2003 or 2005, right? And so I started this program in 2017. So that's literally 12 years going back to school. So I'm like, oh man, I got to go back to school again and do this again. But the pivot was this, yo. In 2016, brought my son. He was about, 1 year old. You know what I mean? So excited that, my pops was able to see him and to spend time with him. You know, I want my son to have a relationship with my pops. And I remember this day vividly, right? We were just chilling on the couch. I said goodbye to pops, moms, you know what I'm saying? And then they was going to the store or something. So I'm exiting, I'm on the road and my mom's behind me in the road, right? You know what I mean? Ready to go to the supermarket. And then she calls me and I said, what's up? And then she's like, oh, I gotta take your dad to the hospital. He's having some stomach pains. I said, okay. And mind you, like he was going through a lot of pain. You know, he had a lot of medication, medical ailments and whatnot. And so I thought this is something else, another thing, right? The day after, your pop's still in the hospital, they're going to have to run some tests. So I go over there, and just go visit him. And you can tell he was just like, man, I'm in this hospital again, I was like, yeah, just like anything, you're going to always, you're going to pull through. It's all good. And so he had asked me, and I have a picture of this too, a picture of him with shaving cream on his face. And he had said to me, yo, could you help shave me? Cause he was feeling weak. I said, all right. So I'm shaving him and this and that. I'm shaving him. I said, why you want to get shaved? He said, Nate, I got to go into the surgery looking good. I was like, of course, pops. You know what I mean? You got to look clean. I got you. And then he says to me, dang, these doctors or nurses, man, like they don't know what to do. I told you, Nate, you should be a doctor. How many times I got to tell you to be a doctor? You're doing this hip hop thing. You might as well be a Dr. Dre. Be a doctor, right? He was just cracking jokes, jokes. Doctor. I was like, yeah. Of course I'll appease him. I was like, yeah, whatever. Someday, doctor, whatever. And so, the nurses wheeled him away, to go into surgery. And bro, that was the last time I saw him, man. Last conversation. And man, it hit me so hard to know, like, what? He's gone? Like, he's not here no more? I just had a conversation. He told me, with like all these jokes and everything. And, he passed away due to some complications. He had something worse than it was originally diagnosed. And it was hard, man, and I pondered and I reflected on our last conversation. And I said, you know what? I'm going to apply for doctoral school. That's the pivot. This is the moment in my life where, the universe sent me a sign and said, look, if you're not doing this for your pops, do it for yourself. Do it for your community. And so I applied to the doctoral program and, and got in, and here I am, moments away from graduating this year. And I have to attribute that to the belief that my pops had in me. And while I'm not the doctor that he intended me to become, I'm a doctor nevertheless. And I want to be able to say to him that he was able to, his goal as a parent has came true, that he's finally has a doctor in the family.
Thanks for sharing that, brother. I appreciate that. That's going through loss is definitely like tough. Like it was the first time I went through a loss this year with my Lola and all that, and so I appreciate you sharing. And it's a beautiful pivot in that way that you're able to dedicate something along with also doing it for yourself. It's like sounds like it's and for your community.
Yeah,
it's like all in working together in that sense. But before that, like in your I want to ask, and I think in this article you did talk about how there was a moment where your dad said, "I'm proud of you." Right, because just over Facebook on one time that hit you when you were posting about the hip hop conference, things like that. If you're willing, how did that relationship with your dad or your parents change throughout the years in terms of having these expectations to be a certain, live a certain way, right? In terms of academia or jobs, but then kind of finding then your route through academia. It's still success there, but still pushing back because you're utilizing hip hop, right? That was definitely not within their kind of vision in that way. How did the relationship change throughout the years, and did it develop for the better in that way? And what were the kind of pivots in that relationship?
Yeah, it's a great question. My pops and I, we had a hard relationship growing up. I'm the oldest of four. So I was supposed, I'm considered the man of the house when he's not there, right? And so, in the earlier years, he would be away for 6 to 8 months at a time. He would go overseas. So I would have to like hold it down with my moms and my brother and sisters at the time. And so there's this level of responsibility that was placed upon me. So I had to grow up real fast, right? When he wasn't in town and when he was there, he showed a lot of tough love, man. There was no, I love you, I miss you, none of that. It was very, it was hyper masculinity, you know what I mean? Him being part of this military life, seeing his compatriots, right? All like very, hyper masculine, it was that's just how he raised me. Right. And as a result of that, there were certain things that he wanted of us, like particularly with me, super high expectations. You had to be a doctor, you had to be an engineer, you had to be a lawyer, all of that. Right. And so like these high expectations really drove a wedge between my pops and myself, right, in terms of the relationship, because I would push back and resist, and then he would come back and be like, what if you're not going to abide by this, you can't live under my roof, the whole spiel, right? And so it was very rough, because I wanted to carve my own path. I didn't want to go the path that he wanted me to go on, right? I don't know, just because I was stubborn, I was too proud. I mean, we both have a lot of pride. That's the big thing about me and my pops. When we get into fights, no one wants to lose, right? But imagine now in hindsight, it's interesting because when you get older, you start to like understand perspective differently. And I was like, wow, this is me now. Like, what was it like for my pops to be at the level he's at in the military? He was like the highest ranked at the time. So every time he goes to work, he demanded respect. People saluted him. Like he was like the man. But coming home, but he wasn't the man because his son was disobedient, because his son didn't want to be a doctor, because his son wouldn't listen to him, because his son was like being rebellious. Like as a young kid, I didn't know what I was doing was counter to his experience while he was at work. So, I was like, dang, I wonder what he was going through, because he would go to work and be like, everybody respects me, but my son doesn't. What's wrong with him? You know what I mean? So he would lash at me and I would never know why. And so that to me was an aha moment later on in life. I was like, damn, I wish I could have done things differently. But when you're like your teenager, you're only thinking about yourself, right? You're only thinking about like, you think of your parents as being nagging, But as a parent myself, I'm starting to understand like certain things, why they said the certain things or why they do the certain things, because there's context. It's not because they're nagging you. It's because there's this context behind it. And then when I was taking the psychology and behavior of Filipinos, the one thing that really I walked away from that class that won't ever leave me ever, ever, ever is that how do parents, Filipino parents, define success, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, because you got to be a doctor, engineer, lawyer, nurse. Yeah, I got the answer, right? And then they're like, yeah, that's part of it. But the definition of success in the Filipino culture is this. If you're going to be a successful parent, the successful parent is defined by the success of your children. If your children's not successful, you as a parent is not successful. You as a parent is not successful. The name behind it, the lineage, Nevado, is unsuccessful. A Nevado clan in the Philippines, seeing that your children, your relatives unsuccessful, it's a bad name, right? It's all connected, right? And so I was like, oh, snaps. So partly why that, the limited knowledge that Filipino parents have in general in terms of what is success is in America is limited to like 4 or 5 professions, which is why. But it's not so much the professions they were pushing. It was the idea that they want their kids to be successful. Because if they're successful, they can sustain themselves. They can raise themselves. They're financially stable. That's all. All they want us to be is that they know that their kids are going to be taken care of when they pass on. One of the biggest fears that any parent can have is that their children are not going to be successful or they're going to fall through the cracks or anything. You want everything to be the best. For him, his understanding of success was if you're a doctor, you're going to be successful. But I took it as a young kid as you have to be a doctor. What I should have realized is whatever you do, Nate, whatever profession you get into, be successful and work hard. But that was a message I didn't get because literally I was thinking like engineer, even though he's probably talking about literally being a doctor and engineer, right? But in hindsight, there's this message being sent to me that that's what it's about, right? So, so that is happening. And then so, the reason why I share that concept about Filipino success is because when I finally got my master's degree in counseling, I finally got my first paycheck. And I was like, what? Counselors make this much money? What? I gave my first paycheck to my parents. And when they saw my paycheck, especially my pops, he says, wow, I'm proud of you. Right? Because for him, that dollar signs, the amount of that made him realize that I'm going to be okay. That his son's going to be okay. That he doesn't have to worry about me anymore. Right? So even if he's not a doctor, even if he's not an engineer, that paycheck was sort of like the proof. It's like, okay, my son's going to be okay. So he was super supportive in my work in counseling. When it came to hip hop, I didn't really have much conversation around with hip hop with him. The thing about my pops also, he was very deep into politics, right? There's a joke every time you come to my house, and I don't know if you was there at Skyline, but I was once on the cover of the class schedule, right? I don't know if you were in Skyline at the time. So remember. I was front and center. And so I was on the class schedule. My parents, mom especially, was like, Nate, go get 20 of your class schedules and bring it home so I can send it to the Philippines. You know what I mean? There was a certain pride, right? It's like your son is on the cover of the Skyline College class schedule that's being mailed to every house in the Bay Area. So there's this running joke. Every time you go to the Nevado residence in Antioch, there's going to be 3 pictures on the wall when you first walk in. Nate Nevado on Skyline College, Jesus Christ, and George W. Bush. George W. Bush that says, to Alberto Nevado, thank you for service, President George W. Bush. My dad was a super hardcore Republican, which is why we never talked politics in the house. He was anti-hip hop, you know what I mean? But I get it. You know, sometimes your upbringing, the way you're raised, and your ideologies and perspectives is informed by certain things. You know, mad love to my pops, but because we have different perspectives and different ideologies, that also added a layer to our relationship, right? Me not being wanting to become a doctor, to we having differing politics and ideologies, it's a recipe for disaster. You know what I mean? And so a lot of times when we engage in conversation, it's like walking on eggshells, right? So you kind of avoid the topics. Because, you know, you're with family, you know what I mean? You don't want anything to kind of spark up any conversation that's going to lead into some kind of fight, particularly when you're at family parties. So, you know, I had the respect to know, like, you know, if he says a comment about something that might touch a nerve, I just got to bite my tongue, you know what I mean? And so you know, he has his ways. But when I got my master's in counseling, you know, he was so proud of me. You know what I mean? Like I found that my relationship got better. We had more deeper conversations, and my conversation with him became exponentially better when he went back to school. See, he was retired from the Navy and he started working for BART. And BART was providing some incentives for BART employees, right? Because he was an electrical engineer for BART, fixing the BART trains. They were giving, what do you call it? They were giving, what do you call those stipends to get to go to college? And so my dad took advantage of that program and decided to go back to school, you know, just to go to school. My pops, being in the military, he's always productive. He wants to be doing something. He wants to fix something. He wants to break it and then fix it again. You know, he wants to be busy. So he went to Los Medanos College, LMC in Pittsburgh, and started taking classes. Then he took an Asian American studies class called the Asian American Family. And then one day he calls me up. The same way I had this revelation of the success of Filipino parents is the success of their children, he had a parallel revelation in terms of the struggle, the conflict, and the tensions that Asian American kids, particularly Filipino kids, have to navigate between two cultures. Having to understand Filipino culture, but also having to understand American culture, just trying to figure out how to merge the two. And he calls me up. He said, Nate, I'm reading this article. Were you experiencing this when you were in middle school and high school? I said, yes, I was. And that's why I was the way I was, Dad. And then he was like, I didn't know. If I knew, I would be able to treat you differently. And we, you know, because that's all past and done. I'm an adult now. We both shared a good laugh. And like, here we are learning about Asian American studies and this and that. We learning about ourselves in this moment. That was probably one of the highlights of my time with him. And then seeing him graduate with an associate degree at LMC in interdisciplinary studies, like, you know, general ed studies. And it was funny because I was his counselor. It's like, okay, Dad, you need to take this. Why do I have to take science, huh? Can I? He was like, can I be exempt from it? It's like, no, it doesn't work that way, Dad. You need to get in a degree. You got to get that science class with the lab. A lab also? Oh my goodness.
When he went back?
He had to be 60s. Yeah, damn, 60s. And to see him in his cap and gown, super proud. Like, oh, I was so happy for him, man. Yeah. But yeah, that moment where he, you know, he took that Asian American Studies class. He was able to learn about me when I was at Filipino Studies. I was learning about him, and that's one of the biggest regrets sometimes is that you wish you had those kind of conversations when he was still alive. But we were in two different places in our levels of life, right? So
thank you for sharing. That's a great reflection on your relationship with your pops. And when I was listening to it, right, because you've broken down, right, trying to understand the expression of hypermasculinity in these and kind of humanizing him and not blaming him like, oh, you're the cause of these issues, but understanding that he developed and got either political views or parenting views because of these confounding factors such as immigrating here, or also the pressures, right, of being attached to the name or being successful, things like that, right? How do you now approach yourself as a father, right? Because you have a boy, right? That I'm thinking, if I remember right?
Yep.
And then there's this kind of responsibility as a father to kind of, especially with the case of raising up a boy, but at the same time having these criticisms and critiques of hypermasculinity. And then how do you approach that now? I know they're young, but then they're 4, right?
Yes.
But then it still starts already ingraining, and the learning process is already started.
Yeah.
Right? No, is there anything that you approach it differently now?
Right.
Or?
No, I'm very, me and my partner Dana, we were very mindful in terms of the way we raise our son DJ Darius Jaden. DJ.
Okay, so now you need 3 other elements.
I know, we got the MC and then we got a DJ. It's funny because Darius Jaden, like the name in itself is very symbolic, right? You know, Darius is a Persian name that is translated into the king of counselors, the king of healing.
Oh, really?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, Darius.
Yeah, Darius. And then Jaden.
Interesting.
My partner loves the stone jade. And so instead of saying Jade, we say Jaden. And so we had Darius and Jaden and we put it together. And people say, oh, you did that on purpose. No, we did not. But it happened to be a DJ. So, I mean, the universe made it happen, you know. But we're very mindful in terms of how we raise DJ, right? Because, you know, again, everything that we do, at least let me speak for myself, you know, because my partner also has her way of raising that's informed by her experiences, right? That, you know, I don't want to project this idea of like, you know, man and woman, and these are the roles that you have to abide by, right? What I want to teach my child is this idea of compassion, right? This compassion towards everyone, right? That you are no better than the other person next to you, right? There's no competition, that everything's about community, right? So we teach him very early on this idea of like, you know, there's this book. It's a very interesting book. I forgot the author's name, but, you know, 0, 1, and 2. That's the name of the book. 0, 1, and 2. And it really talks about, you know, each book has a different story. Like 0 talks about the feeling of being left out because 0 feels like they're nothing, but they're actually somebody, right? And so he loves that book because it allows him to express that while we may have our own differences, right, we could be somebody. It's very like hip hop, right? When people say about hip hop.
Are these kids' books?
These are kids' books.
Oh, that you're reading to DJ.
Yeah.
Okay.
These are kids' books. And, you know, it's like hip hop, right? You're trying to make something out of nothing. But we argue back is that it's not about nothing because nothing comes from something. Right. And so how do you tell 0 that he's something? Well, 0 becomes 10. 0 becomes 100. So he's starting to understand that as a young kid that he has certain talents and skills that some people may not see, but later down in life he'll have, right? So being compassionate with people that have differences. The other books talks about bullying, right? How do you, you know, work with bullying? And the other one's about like, you know, what it means to dismantle this idea of this is for boys and this is for girls, right? And one moment that really stuck out for me that I know he's starting to learn is that when I went to go pick him up from school one day, I was me and then another child's parents, right? DJ came up to his best friend and then started holding his hand, right? And then I noticed immediately the guy was getting really uncomfortable. And he says, "Are you okay with your son holding my son's hand?" I was like, if he wants to hold my son's hand, he can hold his hand. Do you have a problem with that? You know what I mean? Just wondering, you know, I think he was trying to be respectful, but you can clearly see that he was kind of like uneasy and uncomfortable, right? You know, and, you know, and DJ, when I asked DJ, it's like, what is it like to be friends with all these folks and to hold hands? And it's like, I'm very kind. I love people. I mean, we don't have to be judged, you know, by our actions. He didn't say that in those words, but he understands like, you know, it's okay to be compassionate with people, right? You know, when I was being raised up, you know, if I was holding hand with another guy, my dad would just smack my hand, you know what I mean? And so like, that is just one story where I can say that we are very conscious and critical about like not being able to fall down that pathway where we're saying this is how you should be and this is how you should present yourself, right? We want him to be happy no matter what. We want him to be kind. We want him to be respectful to people. We want him to have good manners. You know what I mean? Like, but we also want him to also, represent himself too, in different ways. So we're always engaging him with art activities, role plays. He's so, man, he says the strangest things, man. Like for real. Like one time he was like, came up to me and he has no concept of money. I'm like, where are you getting these concept of money? And then I was like, he's like, I went to mom and asked for $10,000. It's like $10,000. And mom told me to ask you. I was like, okay, Dad, can I get $10,000? I said, no, you can ask your mom. Goes back to mom. Mom goes like, well, why don't you go ask Dad for $100? Maybe not 10,000. Comes back to me. I said, can he say $100? I was like, nah. He says, but $10,000 is more than $100. Don't you want to give me the money that's less money?
He says that.
I was like, who are you? Like
He's four? He's four?
He's four. He's trying to negotiate with me now. He's using negotiation skills on me. Talking about like money.
He's got the first H, hustle.
Yeah, he got the hustle, man. Now he's going to get the help and going to engage him in some hip hop. But yeah, like for me, it's like I'm very, I want him to have the best life possible. I want to engage him so that he can become the best version of himself. Of course, we'll help with that process, but I also want him to like make some of those decisions.
So you're in this role of a father. You're also counselor, so you mentor a lot of folks. The homie wanted to ask, do you have your own mentors? And who do you reach out to them? What does that relationship look like?
Ooh, dang. Mentors. It's interesting, bro. Man.
And who were some of your mentors?
Some of my mentors. Interestingly enough, like as I was navigating through all my times, growing up through the educational system, and I think I kind of alluded to this earlier today, that idea of independent hustle, that I was like navigating this on my own. And it wasn't until I got to say San Francisco State, my bachelor's degree, Asian American Studies, that I began to have a semblance of someone who became a mentor. Asian American professor, now retired, Professor Dan Begonia, saw something in me and really told me like, look, man, like through your words and spoken word, like you can really teach. You can be a teacher. You can change lives, And I was like, really? Okay, I'm not making the grades, but I'll try. I just want to do this artwork. I just want to do the writing, But he was the first person that really put it out there. And then when he wrote my letter of recommendation for the counseling program, I'm reading it. I'm saying to myself, is this the same me? Like, is this his name that he's talking about? Like, but to actually read and him validating my experiences and really highlighting my strengths allowed me to understand, wow, okay, like I could be someone. He's also the other person that really made me understand that we could redefine and redesign our classroom spaces. He would always make it a point. You want rows of columns or do you want to be in a circle? Because we can go to rows and columns, right? We can be standard. We can be traditional. And so at the time that was foreign to me. I'm like, it's always been rows and columns, right? But again, that's like dismantling this ideology that things has to be in a certain way, that, oh, snaps, we can actually move the desk into a circle and be okay with that and have education. So he was about that, like really challenging status quo, challenging the dominant narrative and saying, hey, we need to inject ourselves into the space and make it our own. And so that's something that I kind of took with me as I became older. And then when I got into my master's program, Dr. Alvin Alvarez, the Filipino cat that was on the panel, was the one who really helped push me too. I remember there was a time, man, Chris, I was about to give up, man.
Master's program?
Yeah, master's program. I mean, there was a conversation where he was like, he said something to the effect of like, just because we're Filipinos, they know Filipino discount here. Right.
Stupid.
Like seriously, like he essentially was telling me this you're gonna work on your own. Don't think we know we Filipinos that I'm gonna give you a free ride. You're gonna have to work for your stuff.
Yeah.
Especially after he had advocated for me to be in the program.
Yeah.
Right. I couldn't let him down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I could tell you 2 instances, and then these 2 instances will lead to a lesson that I learned. The first instance was me being a student that sometimes makes some poor decisions, decides that one day I'm not going to show to class. You know, because I've done that several times in my bachelor's and definitely in DVC and definitely in high school. I'm going to cut class. I don't feel like coming to class. Turns out that I wasn't the only one in class. And he looks at me and said, where you been? And I said, places. And then he's like, places, huh? Okay. And he walks away. But I would never forget that look. Like this look of like, it's almost a look like my pops would give me. Like this look of disappointment, look of like, that's on you, right? And it just tore me up inside because it's like, wow, I just disappointed him. And what that meant to me was that he was investing his time and energy to mentor me. And here I am cutting his class. You know what I mean? That's the first semester, right? And I never cut class ever since. You know what I mean? I was engaged and everything, but that was huge. And then the second instance was we had this project, and it was a poster presentation about a program that we're developing in a college. It was a made up program, and we had to share what the program was about, who are we serving, what are the outcomes, what's the methodology, et cetera, right? So, like a poster presentation, you go around, people are asking questions. So he arrives to my table and he starts asking a question, and there was 2 of us.
Alvin,
right?
Okay.
So it's me and my partner where we're talking about our program, and this whole time he's not even looking at my partner, he's looking at me. And then he says, what do you think? So he's playing a parent of a child a parent of a child that he's hoping to bring to this program. So he's role playing, at least I thought he was. So he's asking me all these questions, and then my partner tries to, save me because I'm super anxious and I'm stressing. And then he tells the dude, have him answer it. Pointing at me, I want Nate to answer it. So essentially I did the presentation all on my own, and he was grilling me, and his voice started getting louder. It got so loud, Chris, that all the poster presentations stopped. It became a spotlight of him grilling me with all these questions. So I don't see why I should bring my kid to your program, and all I remember was I was stumbling over words because I was thrown off. And then after that, it was a break time. I went out into hallway, and half the class went outside, and they were like, yo, Nate, you're cool? Man, that's messed up what Alvin did to you, man. He was like, that was uncalled for. Like he didn't do that to any of the groups. And I felt like I was being, I was being targeted. You know what I mean? Like he directed all the energy to me, like he wanted to prove a point or something. And I was just like so pissed off. Like, who is this guy I think he is? Does he not know that I'm struggling already as a student trying to be in this program where I don't believe that I'm part of? Like, I was going through it. That same night, we had a orientation where I was kind of co-leading with our counseling student association. And we had a little time where we're like eating appetizers and whatnot. And I seen him. I'm like, damn, like I'm hella pissed off. And I'm just kind of like trying to avoid him. And he sits right next to me. It's like, man, like I'm trying to avoid you, bro. And he looks at me. He's like, yo, Nate, you did a good job out there. I was like, what? It's like, look, I want to apologize that I came at you like that. But I needed to press you. I needed to push you. I needed to see what you're capable of. Because all this time that I've been with you in this class, I sense this imposter syndrome. I sense this lack of confidence or lack of motivation. I need you to be the Nate that I know you could become, right? So if you can believe that, I will be there 100%. Like I'll have your back all the way through. And from that moment on, I was like, damn, well, well, that's messed up. You should have just told me that in the beginning instead of put me on blast. I would have responded still. You know what I mean? But y'all had to put an act on that and make a show out of that. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's just his way of doing, right? And but that stuck with me. You know what I'm saying? That stuck with me, and so I never forget that moment. And ever since that, we good friends, colleagues, mentors. So those are the two mentors that come right off top, that emerged for me.
Yeah. But you do kind of identify with that description of like an independent hustler and trying to kind of learn the lessons along the way and then taking them when these opportunities of mentorship come upon.
Yeah. And I think part of that independent hustle was really informed by my own experiences growing up. Dad wasn't around because he was overseas. So I had to make decisions on my own. And I guess I just got so used to it that in many ways I was mentoring myself, learning as I'm going. So.
But it sounds like you've also kind of recalling what you said in the beginning about, yes, you're an independent hustler, but also learning that you can't do everything all the time.
Exactly.
And to go further, you build a team and surround yourself with those people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Dope. Starting to come to the end, I want to ask a little hip hop question, but because of that, can I request that you do a little freestyle? All right, we about to get a little freestyle session in with Nate Diggs. Was that also what was your MC name during high school and all that?
Yeah. But it was during high school. It's interesting. It was a very strange name when I look back at it. I think again, no plan. Everything's like no plan, spontaneous.
Yeah.
But they called me Innocent. Like innocent, my initials is NSN, right? But then I look innocent, and so watch out, this cat's coming and creeping.
So it was innocent.
Yeah, innocent.
Oh,
yeah, but it was
okay.
it was
That was
word,
your high school.
Yeah, a little word play, but it was the initials,
Innocent.
my initials.
Yeah. And then you rocked with that for the most part.
For the most part, and then I transitioned to Nate Diggs as part of Lyrical Assassins, and then we went from there, and it's just kind of stuck.
Nice. All right. We're going to have a freestyle session over this Soul Chef beat.
Oh, man.
The block.
Soul Chef.
Nate Diggs.
Oh,
Innocent.
Man. Innocent.
Up in the Filipino garage.
Yeah. This is Soul Chef, man. Here we go. What? Here we go. What? Man, I wonder, what'll be the Soul Chef cooking? Coming out with the verse that I'm hooking. I'm over here, the Califree stevia, liquidify, going on with stereo. Whatever you be with the TEA, I wonder if you gonna be from the back in the day. It's the Bay Area with the Filipino cat, cause it's gonna be this or that. I know that I'll be here looking with the wisdom. I'm over here thinking about intelligent wisdom. Empire funkin', stunkin' in the dunk, like what is going on, like a skunk that stunk. But I wanna make sure that I'm here with my cell phone, looking around, cause you know what's up, I never condone. All the prone looking like the busy bone with the thuggish ruggish bone, cause I get cooler than the ice cream cone. Wonder if you wanna go down and never getting so stoned. But I'm doing this freestyle with the lyrical. I'm over here like God with the miracle. Man, shoot going on with the massage. Camouflage going on with Filipino garage. I said something going on the face of God. I'm looking around cause there's no be fake facade. Shoot. I know that I'll be here and I hear my hair singing, stringing, like with the guitar stringing. I feel the bells be ringing, looking around cause I know what's up with the bing and zing. I'm making up words and vocabularies. I'm over here like no little Mary. I'm looking at the horror movies, I'm thinking scary. Shoot is going on with the apothecary, with the medicine. With meditation, I'm over here with the pure simulation. What's the nation going on the creation? I'm over here making the surest innovation. Look, man, the day that I die, you better listen to Macca McFly. Looking at back, going on if you even try. Looking around, cause I sit back and then I sigh. Where I ride, where I pride. Looking around cause you know what's up though. And many style, my perspective, no sense for contraceptive. Looking around cause my phone had no reception. Shoot man with this freestyle kicking in. Going on cause you know I'll be picking it. Like that cause you know you'll be licking it. Like a stamp going on, should be tricking it. I feel it like this water, like my Bruce Lee. Going on cause you know you could fool me. Shoot me, educate, then you school me. Cause you know what's up, I'm going on, you fool me. Man, we on this freestyle. I don't know when I make this lady smile. Like that, slithering like a reptile. Going on with many minutes per mile.
Hey!
Oh shoot! Oh man, this is a dope beat, bro.
This is a dope beat. Soul Chef has so many good beats. Finish it off,
man. Finishing it off with this track, man. Like that, cause you know it's the crack band. My God, going on with the Filipinos, cause you know it's going on with the Chinos. Shoot, man, I'm an entrepreneur. Looking around, cause you know that my rhymes are pure. Looking for cure like that. Then my soul, like I'm going on, man. I need to go and see a masseur, but telling me time and I never be weak. Looking around, I need 8 hours of sleep. Shoot, I know that my dreams are getting deep. My guy going on and needs to sleep. Shoot, dang.
Hey,
that's crazy.
Innocent,
Innocent.
Dope. Thanks for that freestyle. Last question from the homie. He wants to ask you, let's make it, he asked for 5, but let's just boil it down to 3. What are your top 3 hip hop projects?
Ooh, top 3 hip hop projects.
Top
like
3
ever
hip-hop.
or like, you know, in the future.
Let's go
or
ever. He just asked. Top. Let's go top 3 hip hop projects.
Oh, okay. All right, so top 3. You know, because it is 2020, it's about visionaries, you know, 2020 vision, right? Okay. So it's about clarity. It's about balance. It's about harmony, right? So I'm seeking more harmony between hip hop and hip hop education. So 3 projects. I feel like I'm just announcing this for the very first time live on the Filipino Garage. We're pulling this out of the universe. So you're the first one to hear this joint.
Okay.
Right? You know, maybe I share this with my family members, but you know, part of my work, and I'm graduating, becoming an educational consultant within hip hop ed, right? And so flipping my dissertation to an actual book. That's one hip hop project, right? The second piece is really establishing the foundation for a cultural center that allows space for hip hop education to exist away from, you know, schools and campuses. So having something in the community. So those are coming into now, but bringing also Rock the School Bells. So rather than students come to Rock the School Bells, we're looking at ways where we bring Rock the School Bells to school. So we're doing a Rock the School Bells tour to several middle schools and high schools in the future. Right. And so for us, it's one thing that you redefine educational spaces at a college setting, but it's much more powerful when you begin to take that space that you've created and bring it to the high schools, and having principals and vice principals and teachers being able to see firsthand the power of hip hop in their own institution, that this can be possible, and how people and youth resonate from it is going to be powerful. It's going to definitely do some wonders for their community. So those are 3 projects that's right off top. Also working on a long-awaited album. You know, that I've been working on some pieces. As Nate Diggs.
Okay.
You know, so just really working on that post dissertation, but a lot of it is derived from, I think a lot of the pieces, the working pieces that I've had is like one, like my relationship with my pops. One, the last conversation with my pops, that's flipped into a song. You know, and just my experiences in hip hop ed, you know, and then we have a little swag song in there for sure.
I like in your freestyle, the little shout out to Makibaka McFly.
Yeah, man. Yeah, major. Shout out to Aristyles, man.
Aristyles dropped some gold.
Yeah, he surely did. I know. I really appreciate him. And it was funny. We was over Facebook. We were having like a little joke, you know, and I was kind of lightweight serious, but not, because I don't have the time. But like, you know, we were telling, like, you know, the old man raps, right? You know what I mean? Like, daddies, we daddies, you know, we parents, we're professionals. So it's hitting up Aristyles. Nomi was on that thread. Like, man, we gotta like put together an album for the pops, you know what I mean? To be on one album and put something together.
Yes, I'm with that. I see Joel up
Joel,
there.
yeah, Joel was on there too. Yep.
I need to see that.
We were joking about it, but I remember it was Princess. She was like, it has to happen. I'm like, yeah, we trying to put this in the universe. But when, it's going to happen. But I appreciate Aristotle bringing out Makibaka, McFly.
Yeah.
It's very timely. While, the political, social climate of today right now is absolutely necessary to acknowledge and recognize where we come from and never forgetting the stories, the type of experiences that our ancestors has to go through to create a place for us to exist in this place. You know what I mean? It's just never forgetting. Back to the Future like McFly.
Dope. How about top 3 your personal hip hop albums to listen to?
Oh, snaps. Whew. Let's see. To listen to, like, man, dang. See, these top 3 joints are so hard, man. It's so hard.
and I actually got my closing question is a top 3 thing too.
Oh man.
So just gotta throw it there.
The top 3. Man, okay. Immediately. There's so many I can choose from, but immediately right off the top, like Nas's Illmatic. He's, that in itself is a classic album, but it taught me the evolution of the storytelling. Like for me, like I'm gonna say it like this. I don't know how much time we got, but my dissertation is very non-traditional. The way I'm writing it, it's very informed by how Nas has written his Illmatic track album. So my dissertation is not a traditional 5 chapters. It's actually 9 tracks, right? It's in the form of a hip hop soundtrack. Each chapter leads in with a song, and it tells a story of each individual that I'm interviewing. And I'm sharing a
song of another artist or a song.
It could be a song of an artist. It could be a piece that they have written. It could be an excerpt of their book, right? And so I wanted to be non-traditional in that. And so Nas was like really why I really went that route. But it's taken me a long time to write because it's 9 chapters as opposed to 5.
Yeah.
The second one, Ready to Die.
You know what's funny though? Before you go to the second one, the homie called you. He was like, "Oh, and coming on the Filipino Nas,
the Filipino Nas,
Filipino
dang!
Nas.
Oh wow, dang! Okay,
so
man, I love it.
That first one
I
is your
love
top
it.
album, bro.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that comment. And then I gotta give it up for my man, Ready to Die, Notorious B.I.G. I thought that album was so profound for someone who saw himself in a certain type of way, like being this overwhelmed. He even said it, like being overweight, being ugly. I'm just ready to die. You know what I'm saying? And being able to share stories about his upbringing and how he saw himself, but how he navigated through those struggles. You know what I'm saying? That was an instant classic. And then more recently, not recently, but in 2014, To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. That to me was prominent and profound because that was my first year teaching the CIPHER hip hop learning community. It was 2014. My class was very glued to the TV, what was happening in Ferguson when Brother Mike Brown went down. And the day in which the police officer was acquitted from all of the charges, like my class was like pissed off. I had this whole lesson plan ready for some things and I could sense the energy in the class. I knew what it's about. So that night before the class, I redid my whole lesson plan to center around what they're experiencing in terms of emotions, feelings, thoughts. So it became this sort of cipher in terms of like, what are you guys engaging in? What are you feeling like? And I remembered like, what is one of the solutions that you want to do? Like, what's the one solution you want to do right now? And one of the students said, let's post on Instagram our support for Ferguson right now. So we took this group picture, hashtag whatever the statement they wanted to say. We sent it to the hashtag that Ferguson was putting out there for Instagram to show them support. But that to me was like the songs that came out of Kendrick Lamar, right? Particularly All Right. And I think that became the anthem for my class because even though they don't know Mike Brown personally, but there is something about him that they can really connect with and vibe with and identify with, that a part of them also died with him. And so so that to me was, if you can have an album that can do that to folks, to have you feel in a certain type of way and have you experience a wide range of emotions, that album is classic, right? It's phenomenal, right? And so, I got other albums we can put out there, but those would be my top 3 for now.
That's a solid top 3. I think just talking about it, I'm gonna re-listen to the Illmatic. It is one kind of worth listening to as an album, see the construction and the storytelling, and to think that how young he was
18
at putting that out, right? And it's been a classic for so long.
It was.
It's solid. This motherfucker 18?
Right.
I'm fucking 28.
Yeah.
I'm like, damn, it was there. It was there, man. And it's almost a beautiful reminder of the wisdom of the youth.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
When you have that as this pivotal piece of work. Dope. Coming to an end, I always like to ask, what are 3 pieces of advice now that you would give to your younger self? And with the idea that other people can see themselves in your younger self, or are going through similar experiences, such as maybe they just went to CC and are thinking of dropping out, or they're entering their master's program and they're not really feeling it. The struggles there, imposter syndrome, or even those who are even more recently working in academia, or any time frame that you'd like. But upon reflection, what are 3 pieces of advice that you would give?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I think the first one would be, redefine the box. What I mean by that is that, when people say think outside of the box, while I agree to a certain degree, I feel like the box could be a circle, could be a triangle, could be whatever you want it to be. So essentially, my first tip is really like, you get to define what your parameters are, right? Like, this is yours, Secondly, I would say, this is huge, right? And this stems from like my upbringing. In Filipino culture, like, things has to be controlled. But also what I wish I could do back then was take more risks. Take more risks. Because sometimes you're like, well, is it acceptable? Is it culturally acceptable? Is it this? Could I, you know what I mean? Like, you start to question it, but you won't really know until you try, and sometimes taking the risks could be phenomenal. It could make a great change in how you do things, right? And I say this for folks who are kind of stuck in their jobs and who wants to create, say, but creating art, there's no financial stability in that. But how would you know if you don't try? Take that risk, right? And then thirdly, for me, I think I say surround yourself with your dream team, man. You know what I mean? Like, who's going to uplift you? I think it's so important. Like, while I call myself an independent hustler, there was a lot of flaws and a lot of shortcomings that I have that I can, rely on other folks that can help me be a whole self. And collectively, we can all work together and we can win together. And I say that because it's like, they're not only supporting me, but I'm also supporting them, right? And having each other's back, because we want to see the success for everyone. You know what I mean? So those are the 3 things, right? Destroy the box. There's no such thing as keeping it within the box. Take risks, and develop your dream team. Who are you gonna ride with?
Develop your dream team.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that reflection, because it's something that that's always repeated, kind of like, you are the 5 people you surround yourself with, but it's hard to implement unless you're consciously thinking about it.
Yes.
Right? Because at least for me, there's, and for in general, people kind of allow things to fall where they fall. Right? Like, oh yeah, I know you because of this class. So it's almost by chance that you're around certain people, whether that's family, right? Or just circle of friends. But the intentionality between between that and also building a team. And I like the way that you presented it at first a while ago was it's still all love with the people who may not be in that dream team. It's still all love, but you have to be intentional with your time and who you kind of constantly surround yourself with.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge impact.
It is.
That's a huge impact, man. Word.
Yeah.
Much appreciation.
Man.
Thank you for coming on. I wanted to ask, do you have any that message that you want to leave folks with? Any shout outs, things like that?
Yeah. Look, first and foremost, I appreciate you having me here.
Thank you for coming.
And I say this because, oftentimes our history and our stories are lost. So I think about all the folks that really put it out there through their music, through their dance, through their books, right? And so I want to really acknowledge you, my man, for creating a space where Filipino stories are being heard, right? So I didn't want to leave this podcast, this show without honoring you for doing, putting us out there, man. And I really appreciate everything you do. And so I wouldn't be here if you wouldn't be here.
I wouldn't be here if you wouldn't be here,
You know what I mean? So, so big ups to you. Thank you.
Word. Thanks for coming. Man, it's a blessing, bro, for me to have this. Because I get to dive deep and learn more about motherfuckers. Like, I've known you around the community for a minute, right?
For sure.
I was like, but it's another level of dissecting a significant part of our community and learning more about it and putting merit to it, right? And telling our stories is inherently giving value to it, right? And that's why I love, listening to the work that you are doing in terms of academia, but also acknowledging the history behind it, right? History of hip hop, the struggles with family, with migration, of moving around, but also even the struggles with CC in the school, right?
Yeah.
Like, the struggle there is fucking real. Let's not lie. Like, even if you are a doctorate and finishing that right now, people look up to you now, right? But then it's not always apparent to people looking at you to know the story behind that, right? And the struggle, and then being able to shed light on that allows people going through similar experiences to envision themselves in similar positions of power and achievement and success that you are at now, right? So I do appreciate the storytelling that's there, and there's an importance to that, right?
It is.
Part of this podcast is me for fun. I love it. I'm like, all right, let me have people I like on. But another part is what you are saying. While I was listening, a part of me was like, this is an oral history project.
It is,
in a way, and it's important to have those because our histories have been erased in different ways. Right? Whether even going back home to the Philippines and the immigration, things get lost. Right? And it's our responsibility in a way to make sure that we revisit and we tell our stories. So I appreciate you for coming on.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Looking forward to that album drop by the Philam Tatais, right? Tatai educators, right?
I'm going to put it out there and see what happens.
I can see the Tatai lessons, man. That's a good... Sheesh.
This is for all the future fathers.
Oh, my goodness. There's a lot of good MC fathers right now.
A lot of us.
A lot of y'all as educators, community organizers, man, and more people are having kids. We got another new inductee, David Delena. Do a shout out. He's with Charm.
Congrats.
They're gonna have a kid, dude. Him as a rapper, they're all gonna have kids in the future, bro.
Shout out to Del Rocks too.
Del Rocks, yep. Oh my God, you got the DJ right there too.
We're good.
So we're good
set
with the whole crew.
Yeah, do we have a B-boy coming out or something?
You got a whole crew coming, man. So much appreciate. How can people get in touch with you? Do you share your socials?
So definitely hit me up on Instagram. So there's three of them. My own personal at Nate Diggs, Nate N8 DIGGS, and then you can follow us at Rock the School Bells and also at CIPHER Hip Hop or CIPHER Skyline College. Excuse me. So all of that is same handles on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. There you got it.
And Rock the School Bells is coming when?
Yeah, Rock the School Bells Youth Conference coming on Friday, March 6th.
Ooh, that's coming up soon.
I know, man. Skyline College. Yeah, so it's coming soon. Coming soon.
Damn, just
how we
months.
drip.
You swag. Much love, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me, man.